Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
One Piece Talent Copy System by dragonnx. In the vast and perilous world of One Piece, with a seas teeming with pirates, marines, and untold mysteries, a young man is given a second chance at life. Reincarnated into this fantastical universe, he discovers he possesses a unique and powerful copy talent system, an ability that allows him to copy the talents and skills of others, including Double Fruits. Member list: Taz Peterson, Yanko, Leilani Morris, Warlord, Garrick Russell, Warlord, Black Money Young Lion, Warlord, KSGPL 4YZ, Warlord, Adio.
The Maxim slowly docked at the shores of a Brulet island. The crew disembarked. As soon as they stepped onto the island, the perceptive Fujitora tilted his head, a puzzled expression on his face. Strange, this island is eerily quiet. Noir turned to Enel. Can your observation haki pick up anything? The usually boisterous Enel was uncharacteristically silent. Then, he clutched his head in frustration. It's weird. I hear a lot of noise, but I can't pinpoint the locations. Noir was surprised. Enel's observation haki could cover the entire island. Even if the precision wasn't perfect, he shouldn't have trouble identifying specific locations. Riha stepped forward with a grin. That's thanks to one of our comrades. He developed a device that disrupts observation haki. Noir was even more bewildered. Such a device existed in the One Piece world? That could throw the power balance into chaos. Riha, sensing Noir's concern, quickly added, it only scrambles signals over a wide area, including the direction of observation haki. It's useless at close range. Noir breathed a sigh of relief. If someone used this device in close combat, their opponent's observation haki would be practically useless. So, Noidum has scientists capable of creating something like this? Noir asked, intrigued. Riha nodded proudly. The former king taught us many skills. This scientist excels in research, known as the Mad Scientist. Noir gave a strained smile. That nickname screams, obsessed with research. Maybe the scientist could help with the Iron Man suit blueprints I have? Perfect. I've been looking for a skilled scientist. Noir clapped Riha on the shoulder. Let's go, Riha. You know the way, right? Riha's shoulder almost dislocated from the force of the clap, but he replied enthusiastically, yes, your highness, follow me. Then, the burly, bearded man pulled a delicate, light blue bow from his small satchel. The underworld pirates stared at him, bewildered. They hadn't pegged Riha as the sentimental type. Riha, noticing their odd looks, flushed. It's not what you think. He clipped the bow onto his hair. Wear this, and a signal will transmit directions directly to your brain. Noir interrupted, exasperated. Then why didn't you give these bows to Robin and Khalifa earlier? Riha froze, his face draining of color. Eventually, with Riha leading the way, they reached the Noidum remnant's hideout. Noir stared at the sheer cliff face, its peak lost in the clouds. Are you sure? This is the entrance? Riha nodded firmly. He walked up to the cliff and pressed his hand against a seemingly random spot on the rock. That's it. Just as Noir was about to question him, the cliff face began to transform. The rough, textured rock shimmered with blue light, morphing into a cold, metallic gate. The imprint of Riha's hand glowed on the surface. A disembodied voice echoed. Identity confirmed. Welcome, people of Noidum. Noir jumped, staring at the gate in disbelief. It had been so long since he'd heard a genuine mechanical sound in this world that he almost thought it was his system. The crew watched in stunned silence as the gate retracted, revealing a dark passageway illuminated by a futuristic blue light. It had a distinctly cyberpunk feel. With a sense of wonder, Noir followed Riha into the passage. As soon as they were inside, the cliff face shimmered blue again, returning to its unremarkable appearance. The passage was narrow, but Noir couldn't shake his awe. Seeing something this advanced felt surreal in this world. They finally reached the end of the narrow passage, and their view suddenly opened up. They were in a vast, brightly lit space. The ceiling appeared transparent, offering a clear view of the outside world, the sun, clouds, and sky. The technology here was less overt than at the entrance but still far more advanced than anything in the outside world, evidenced by the small, metallic creatures scurrying around. Noir picked one up, examining it with a puzzled expression. What is this? It had long jaws, two mechanical horns on its head, glowing red eyes, and sharp teeth. It looked like a mechanical dragon. The usually stoic Wiper's eyes lit up. That's so cool. Enel, clutching his head, let out a delighted whoop. It's a robot. Awesome. Robin took the small mechanical dragon from Noir, her expression impassive. It's ugly. She tossed it aside. Wiper and Enel scrambled after it, their eyes glued to the discarded toy. Riha, watching their antics, explained with a smile, that's one of the scientist's inventions. A small transport robot. Noir paused. So, it's basically a delivery bot? He thought the Noidum remnants had suffered all these years. Suffered, my ass. They'd skipped the steam and electrical ages and jumped straight into the age of automation. A loud voice boomed through the vast space. Alert, intruders. Noir jumped, startled. Who the hell? Fujitora, standing beside him, muttered, I'm going deaf. Before they could react, a group of armed people rushed in, weapons raised and aimed. Their expressions were hostile. Their clothing was simple, but their weapons were high-tech firearms. Their appearance reminded Noir of Wakanda. The leader of the group eyed Noir and his crew suspiciously, whispering, why didn't the alarm trigger? Where did these people come from? How did they get in undetected? Suddenly, someone noticed Riha standing behind Noir. Riha-sama. Why are you with them? Riha approached the crowd with a beaming smile. Brothers and sisters. He boomed joyfully. I found the prince. Noir is of the first prince's bloodline. The crowd gasped, turning to Noir with astonishment etched on their faces. Riha subtly glanced at Noir, who understood the cue. He removed the pendant from his neck and held it aloft. This is proof. All eyes focused on the pendant, instantly recognizing its significance. Weapons clattered to the ground as everyone dropped to their knees, their voices thundering in unison. All hail the prince! All hail the prince! All hail the prince! Noir had last witnessed a grand display of reverence and merry joie during the slave liberation. This time, however, he didn't urge them to rise. After a moment of silence, Noir spoke softly. Rise, there's no need to kneel. The Noidum remnants obeyed, their eyes shining with renewed hope as they gazed at Noir. A spark had been ignited in their previously downcast expressions. Among them were children, their gazes filled with curiosity and awe. Inside the hidden base, Noir's observation haki returned to full strength. He sensed a significant presence. Well over 10,000 Noidum citizens resided here. While this wasn't a large number for a kingdom, it was still a considerable population for a fallen nation. A sense of relief washed over Noir. Amidst the multitude of emotions swirling around him, Noir's haki easily discerned their sentiments. As Riha had indicated, there was little resistance or dissent among them. Even the adolescents displayed no rebellious tendencies, suggesting they had received specialized upbringing. This struck Noir as remarkable and, to be blunt, a testament to Noidum's effective indoctrination. Their unwavering loyalty to a fallen kingdom, especially after so many years in the changing times, was extraordinary. An elderly man, leaning heavily on a cane, emerged from the crowd, his cloudy eyes fixed on Noir, his voice trembling with emotion. Your Highness, why have you returned to us? Noir smiled confidently, raising his hand and slowly clenching it into a fist. I have the strength now. I will return to our homeland and rebuild the kingdom of Noidum. Tears streamed down the old man's weathered face, and a hearty laugh erupted from his frail chest, sounding like a bellows struggling to pump air. Despite his age, his spirit was indomitable. He flung aside his cane, ignoring his physical limitations, and bent deeply at the waist, his voice ringing with vigor. We will follow you, Your Highness. Riha leaned in, whispering to Noir. This elder was a highly esteemed minister during the former king's reign. Noir understood. It was like the historical accounts he'd read in his past life. A loyal minister, unwilling to accept the downfall of his kingdom, biding his time for years. Now, in his twilight years, he had finally found the heir to the throne. He would undoubtedly devote the remainder of his life to supporting the prince's cause. Noir gently helped the old man to his feet. With me, the rebuilding of Noidum will not put you in danger again. The elder took Noir's words as reassurance, but he knew the truth. He remembered why Noidum had fallen, the enemies they had made. Could the prince really fight the world government? This thought echoed in the minds of many present. Despite the known power of the government and the Marines, their prince had returned. They had to answer his call. It was their duty as citizens of Noidum. If Noir knew they were following him with a sense of fatalistic resolve, he would have told them there was no need. The government, while undeniably powerful, had too many constraints. As long as Noir planned carefully, they wouldn't actively attack him. Having quickly gained the people's allegiance, Riha addressed the crowd with a joyful tone. Gather your belongings and supplies. We depart with the prince at once. The elder, alarmed by the haste, interjected, Isn't this too rushed? We need to construct ships to transport our people and supplies. Noir smiled, his hand enveloped in black mist that swirled and expanded into a massive, ominous vortex in the air. This is one of my abilities. You should all be able to fit inside, if you squeeze in tight. The hidden base was spacious enough for Noir to fully utilize his underworld portal. He guided them towards the swirling gateway while explaining its function. As they stepped into the underworld, the Noidum remnants were awestruck. Beyond the black mist lay an enormous island. Several members of the underworld pirates greeted Noir as he entered the dimension. The elder rushed in front of Noir, his voice filled with concern. Your Highness, be careful. It was Puff who had come to greet them. Seeing the elder shielding Noir, his fish-like face contorted in displeasure. "Who's this old geezer, stealing my spotlight?" Noir laughed, gently pushing the elder aside and reassuring everyone. "This is a world only I can access, it's completely safe. These are my crewmates and companions, there's no need to fear." Relieved, the elder and the others dismissed Noir's mention of crewmates as unimportant. The people of Noitum had long since shed their former conceit. So what if they were pirates? In these times, everyone had to bow to the world government's authority. Noir maintained the underworld portal, allowing the people to begin transporting their supplies. He entrusted Puff with overseeing the operation, instructing him to cooperate fully. Thriller Bark was the size of an island, more than capable of accommodating all the Noitum remnants. The only issue was the lack of housing. The elder, however, assured Noir that this wouldn't be a problem. They had lived in harsh conditions for years. Building a few houses was a trivial matter. Just as everything was proceeding smoothly, several remnants approached Noir with troubled expressions. "Your Highness, we have a situation." Noir frowned. "What is it? Are my crewmates not cooperating?" The remnants shook their heads vehemently. "No, it's not that, it's one of our own." Confused, Noir asked, "What kind of problem?" The remnants explained, "It's the scientist. She hasn't finished her research and doesn't want to leave yet." "She? The scientist who's developing the hockey masking device?" Noir asked, understanding dawning. They nodded eagerly. Noir stroked his chin, intrigued. "Scientists are always eccentric. It looks like I'll have to pay her a visit personally." A Noitum remnant led Noir to a sheltered corner of the base. A nondescript building stood there, its scale reminiscent of a large chemical plant from Noir's previous life. The guide knocked twice on the door. Noir expected it to open automatically, as others had, but instead, it creaked open manually. A nervous-looking man emerged, bowing deeply to Noir. "Your Highness," he said, "the scientist is in the laboratory. Please follow me." A high-tech automated entrance to the base, but a manually operated door here? Noir was slightly bemused but followed the man inside. The interior of the factory was disappointing. Instead of advanced technology, Noir saw only an array of greasy machinery and scattered parts. The impressive facade of the base seemed to have vanished. This eccentric scientist is probably some grimy, unhygienic brute, Noir thought to himself. The guide led him to an office within the factory and knocked hesitantly. "Doctor, alias for scientists too," he announced, "His Highness wishes to see you." Silence. The air grew still. Noir raised an eyebrow. No response? Lost in research, or intentionally ignoring me? Patience is key when dealing with eccentric geniuses. Noir stepped forward and knocked himself. "It's Noir," he said. "May I come in?" Finally, there was a response. A flurry of chaotic noises from within, as if something had been knocked over. Then, a surprisingly loud explosion. Noir smirked, casually disabled the lock with a flick of his wrist, and pushed the door open. "What the?" A dark mass hurtled towards him, burying him and his companions under a pile of debris. Noir struggled out of the junk heap, staring in disbelief at the chaotic state of the room. Was this a landfill? Even for an eccentric scientist, this was excessive. The spacious room was overflowing with clutter, leaving barely any space to stand. Noir looked around, but there was no one in sight. Did the doctor get buried alive in his own trash after the explosion? He muttered. That would be a tragic end. Wait, why is there a strand of pink hair in the garbage? Intrigued, Noir reached out, grasped the hair, and pulled. A small figure emerged with a yelp. Noir blinked, staring at the creature he'd unearthed. Their eyes met. The air crackled with something. A pink-haired little girl, with a fluffy ahoge sticking up from her head, stared back at him. She wore an oversized lab coat, her face smudged with grime, but her features were undeniably angelic. Noir, his face expressionless, tossed the unidentified child aside. This has to be a dream. Maybe she's the doctor's daughter? Ouch! The dazed child landed outside the door, clutching her backside. Two figures rushed to her side. Doctor, are you alright? Noir slowly turned his head, a sense of dread creeping in. Did they just call her doctor? This adorable, seemingly clueless little girl, is the brilliant scientist I was expecting? The pink-haired girl straightened up, her hands clasped behind her back in a pretense of authority. What are you doing here? Didn't His Highness request my presence? She demanded, her voice surprisingly stern, yet childishly high-pitched. The two figures pointed awkwardly behind her. His Highness just threw you out there, doctor. The girl froze, then turned to face Noir, their eyes meeting once again. Noir was speechless. He walked over to her, stooping low to meet her gaze. You're the scientist? The girl's stern facade crumbled. She nodded meekly. Yes, Your Highness. I'm Dr. Alpha Curry. You can call me Curry. Reality sunk in, and Noir felt a pang of disappointment. His mental image of a mad scientist shattered into a million pieces. Shaking his head, Noir asked, All right, Curry, why didn't you leave with the others? Curry's face puffed up like a steamed bun. My invention was almost complete. They barged in and told me to evacuate right away. Curry, a fittingly childish nickname. Noir chuckled, his voice softening instinctively. What kind of research are you doing? Curry's large eyes sparkled. A next-generation combat armor. It's almost finished. Noir's heart skipped a beat. Combat armor, could it be? Do you mind if I take a look? Curry shook her head eagerly, like a child showing off a new toy. Of course, Your Highness, it's my greatest invention. She led Noir out of the cluttered office to a slightly cleaner area where the combat armor was displayed. It was a towering suit of heavy armor, reaching Noir's height. He tapped on it curiously. The material was incredibly durable. Even with hockey, it would take several powerful blows to break through. What does it do? Noir asked. If it was for combat, it must have offensive capabilities. Curry beamed, her nose practically touching the ceiling. She pressed several buttons on the armor's hand, and the suit whirred to life, various weapons extending from its surface. While impressive looking, the weaponry, hand-mounted machine guns, shoulder cannons, was nothing new to Noir, a man from another world. But in this world, it was revolutionary. Ignoring the user's skill and experience, the armor's firepower rivaled that of Frankie's cyborg modifications. However, this was only comparable to Frankie from 2 years ago. After gaining access to Vegapunk's research, Frankie had become a walking arsenal. Curry was just a child. Comparing her to the monstrous genius of Vegapunk was unfair. Besides, Noir didn't need Curry to be centuries ahead of her time. Her current skills were impressive enough. Seeing Noir's indifferent reaction, Curry's cheerful expression faltered. Isn't it amazing? She asked, her voice filled with disappointment. I think it's pretty good. Noir knelt down, meeting the little girl's gaze. Even then, he still towered over her. He gently patted her head. You've done a great job, Curry, but you could do even better. Curry looked up at him skeptically. Even better? That was a novel concept. As a child prodigy, Curry had displayed extraordinary talent from a young age, quickly becoming a key figure among the Noidum remnants. Her inventions were always praised as the best, leading her to believe they were. Knowing she was unconvinced, Noir smiled and pulled out a dusty stack of blueprints from his dimensional storage. Time to dazzle the little scientist. Seeing the item Noir produced seemingly out of thin air, Curry gazed at the blueprints curiously. What's this? Noir smiled enigmatically, handing them over. They were the reward from the system. Blueprints for the entire Iron Man suit series. From the Mark I to the later nanotech suits, complete with the AI system, it was enough to drive any armor researcher in this world mad with excitement. As Noir expected, Curry's eyes lit up the moment she took the blueprints, her gaze fixated on the suit's design. This design, is it real? Curry's expression intensified, her entire being practically absorbed into the schematics. The system's version of the Iron Man suit had undergone subtle magical modifications. All the materials could be sourced in this world, and the performance was no less impressive than the original. That was why Curry was so enthralled. With her innate talent for invention, she could tell these blueprints weren't just a fantasy, but a viable project with the potential for real-world application. As Curry became increasingly engrossed, Noir grinned mischievously and snatched the blueprints back. Curry jumped up, trying to grab them back, but her small stature was no match for Noir. Unable to reach them, she looked up at Noir, her eyes welling up with tears. Noir held Curry up by the scruff of her neck, dangling her in the air. So, now will you come with me? He asked with a playful grin. Curry's face flushed with excitement, and she nodded rapidly. Yes, Your Highness, I don't want to stay here and do research anymore. Noir patted her head. Good girl. Here you go. He wasn't worried about Curry losing the blueprints. She was just a child, and she clearly treasured the designs. Curry eagerly took the thick stack of blueprints, hugging them tightly and giggling. A closer look revealed drool trickling down her chin, shattering any illusion of a composed genius. Noir placed Curry on his shoulders, letting her hold onto his head. Curry, he asked casually, how old are you, exactly? Curry scratched her head with a chubby hand. About 10, I think. Noir felt a pang of sympathy. Children in this world not only develop physically differently, but mentally as well. Noir chuckled ruefully, feeling oddly out of touch. Little did he know, he was barely 18 himself and about to become a warlord of the sea. As they walked, Noir supported Curry's feet, while she, perched on his shoulders, was brimming with excitement. They looked like a father and daughter. Passers-by stared, then smiled warmly at the sight. Curry was an orphan, found abandoned by Riha years ago. Everyone in Noidum had watched her grow up. For years, Curry had focused solely on her research, isolating herself and making no friends her own age. Everyone worried about her. But today, it seemed their prince had a knack for earning her trust. Noir and Curry entered the underworld portal, drawing curious glances. Curry, clutching Noir's hair, couldn't contain her curiosity. Your Highness, where are we? Is this a new dimension? Noir winced, swatting Curry's hand away. It's my special ability. Just think of it as a devil fruit power. Curry nodded vaguely, lost in thought. A devil fruit, truly unfathomable. I tried to study devil fruits before, but Uncle Riha is the only devil fruit user in Noitum. With no test subjects, I couldn't make any progress. Noir's curiosity piqued. What devil fruit does Riha have? Curry replied seriously, the cat fruit, huh? Just as Noir was about to question that, Curry added, but it's an ancient zone, saber-toothed tiger model. Noir relaxed, letting out a breath. That makes more sense. Such a ferocious predator suited Riha's rugged personality. Including Riha, he now had 2 ancient zone users in his crew. Noir grinned, reassuring Curry. Don't worry, you can study devil fruits here. I have plenty of devil fruit users in my crew. Curry nodded enthusiastically, her face beaming. An old man, overseeing the transport of goods, witnessed the scene and sighed wistfully. Perhaps being with his highness will spare Curry from her fate. Noir's eyes flickered with red light, his gaze subtly shifting towards the old man. Enel, his own observation hockey exceptional, sensed something amiss. Just as he was about to ask, Fujitora stopped him with a raised hand. Fujitora walked over to the old man, his blind eyes seemingly seeing everything, and sat down beside him. If you don't mind me asking, sir, what fate might befall Curry while in the captain's company? The old man looked at Fujitora in surprise. This blind man's hearing was incredibly sharp. He sighed heavily. Curry is terminally ill. The doctors in Noitum diagnosed her, there's no cure. Fujitora was shocked. Such a young child, how? The old man's eyes reddened, his posture seeming to shrink further. There's no mistake. When she reaches adulthood, that will be the end for Curry. Fujitora remained silent, his grip tightening on his cane sword. Noir, sensing their conversation, his expression unreadable, tightened his hold on Curry's hand. This little girl was still useful to him, he couldn't let her die. Noir was a pragmatist. If he'd chosen Curry for her skills, she would live and work for him. Enel, casually leaning back, observed Noir and instantly understood. He clapped Fujitora on the shoulder, a carefree smile on his face. Don't look so glum. Our devil captain won't let anything happen to her. Noir pondered ways to cure a terminal illness. If conventional medicine was useless, what about the power of devil fruits? He had high hopes for Trafalgar Law and his Op no Mi. And he could recruit Law into his crew, making the underworld pirates even more formidable. Curry, afflicted with a terminal illness and unlikely to live past childhood, might only be cured by the Op no Mi. The fruit that granted its user the power of miraculous surgery had intrigued Noir from the start. Furthermore, its current user, Trafalgar Law, still had a vulnerability at this point in time. Don Quixote Doflamingo. If Noir could handle Doflamingo, recruiting Law shouldn't be too difficult. And speaking of recruitment, the supernovas of Luffy's generation all possessed considerable strength. Kid, Law, and Luffy went without saying. Then there was the enigmatic Jewelry Bonnie, Capone Beeg with his fortress ability, and Basil Hawkins with his fortune-telling powers. Each had their own strengths and were formidable opponents, living up to their reputation as the worst generation. But such plans were for the future. Noir needed to arrange for everyone to leave, and Curry's situation would have to wait. Just then, Robin navigated through the bustling crowd and approached Noir, looking at the child perched on his shoulder with surprise. Who is this? Curry, seeing the woman, quickly introduced herself. I'm Curry, the research and development scientist. Robin nodded politely, not at all fazed by Curry's age. Being young wasn't an issue. Robin herself had memorized the entire library of Ohara when she was barely old enough to read. Noir looked at Robin, his brow furrowed. Is something wrong? Robin nodded, her face slightly tense. The news has hit the papers. Noir's eyes lit up. Oh, that was faster than I expected. During his negotiations with the government, Noir had stipulated that the news of him becoming a warlord had to be published before he would proceed with the exchange. Robin handed him a newspaper, and Noir eagerly unfolded it. There he was again, on the front page, trending news as always. The headline boldly proclaimed his acceptance into the 7 warlords of the sea. Former warlord Gecko Moria, in violation of ethics and disrespect for life and death, betrayed the government and endangered innocent civilians, and was subsequently slain by the pirate devil Noir. Therefore, the government officially invites the pirate devil Noir to join the 7 warlords of the sea, filling the vacant position left by Moria, and to cooperate with the government. Noir scoffed. Typical government propaganda. So, because Noir had supposedly acted for the good of the people, the government had invited him to become a warlord? After hunting him like a rabid dog, anyone with eyes could see through the charade? Whatever, caring about what the news said about him was a losing battle. The world government's power wasn't just its military might, it was their control over information and public opinion. Noir didn't care how the government spun the narrative as long as it didn't interfere with his plans. Now that they had publicly acknowledged his warlord status, it was time for the next step. After a moment of thought, Noir turned to Robin. Let's contact Sengoku. After the Celestial Dragon incident, he had intentionally left a transponder snail for Sengoku to escalate the conflict. Now, it would serve a different purpose. Noir entered the castle within Thriller Bark, proceeding to a room where a secured transponder snail sat on a table. He took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the carefully crafted words he had prepared. Dealing with the strategist Sengoku required thorough preparation. The transponder snail rang for a while before the call connected, a gruff voice echoing from the receiver. Is this Devil Noir? Noir couldn't help but smile, looking at the aged face on the snail. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, we're practically allies now. No need to be so formal. Sengoku chuckled dryly. Indeed, Mr. Noir. Are you happy with our arrangements? The lack of outrage or even annoyance in Sengoku's voice put Noir on alert. Previously, Sengoku had been easily riled by the escalating events, his emotional volatility giving Noir openings to exploit. But this calm, collected Sengoku was unsettling. Noir chuckled nervously. Of course, I'm happy. Just wondering if you've scraped together enough to pay the ransom. Sengoku didn't hesitate. Rest assured, we have ample funds prepared. This is too easy. What's his game? Where's the fiery Marine Fleet Admiral who wants to chew me out? Sengoku, sitting in his spacious office, smirked inwardly. Let the boy have his fun with words. As long as the Marines win in the end, it doesn't matter. Devil Noir and that ridiculous newspaper article would soon disappear. To achieve his goals, Sengoku was willing to sacrifice a little credibility. Who would believe or even care about promises made to pirates? On the other end of the line, Noir sat in silence for a moment before bursting into laughter. Sengoku paused, hearing Noir's boisterous voice. Excellent, glad to hear the money's ready. Hearing this, Sengoku relaxed slightly. Pirates, always greedy for money. Noir continued, his voice smooth and cheerful. I'll let you know the exchange location later, bye for now. Then, with a smile, Noir hung up, his expression instantly darkened. Damn that Sengoku. He's up to something. Robin, standing beside him, watched Noir's mood swing with a sigh. What's wrong? The news is out. The Marines shouldn't make any more moves, right? Noir shook his head. But what if they retract the news? Robin's eyes widened. Surely not, the whole world has seen it. That would be a huge embarrassment. The whole world? Retracting a statement was just a matter of words for the government. Even Doflamingo, a warlord with a dubious claim to the title, had managed to manipulate the news. With so many celestial dragons involved, Sengoku could easily persuade the government to use this tactic to gain Noir's trust. Robin crossed her arms, a worried expression on her face. What do we do then? Call off the exchange? Noir shook his head, lost in thought. Maybe not. We just need to adjust our plan. A faint light flickered across the ceiling of the dim, cramped room. The Marine officers, their consciousness stolen by the underworld powers, remained still and silent, where they had been for days. In the center of the room, a figure sat cross-legged, deeply immersed in meditation. It was Guillaume. She had remained conscious since Noir's experiment with his powers. After observing her for some time, Noir had found Guillaume surprisingly docile, showing no signs of resistance. He hadn't figured out why, but since she was trapped within Underworld, there was no risk of escape. He decided to leave her alone. In the suffocating silence, Guillaume's eyes suddenly opened. Her gaze, sharp and perceptive, shifted towards the door. The door creaked open, spilling bright light into the room. Guillaume winced, momentarily blinded. Noir and Robin entered. Guillaume smiled faintly, raising a hand to shield her eyes. So, you've finally decided to grace me with your presence. Robin's brow furrowed, a cold smile playing on her lips. Is spouting nonsense a requirement for becoming a Marine Vice Admiral? Guillaume shrugged, her gaze fixed boldly on Noir. Her tone was sharp, almost mocking. I'm speaking plainly. If you hear nonsense, devil child, that's your problem. Robin's expression darkened. She loathed that nickname, reserved only for those closest to her. Seeing Robin's rising anger, Noir quickly grabbed her wrist. Don't waste your breath on her. He walked towards Guillaume, forcing a mask of indifference. You, be quiet. Guillaume chuckled, turning her head away. What does it pain you to see me like this? Noir frowned. Guillaume's feelings toward him were complex, evident in her words and actions. But those feelings stemmed from her experiences within the illusionary world, not reality. Noir had no desire to get entangled with an enemy. Guillaume looked at him intently, then laughed. Putting on such a cold front, how exhausting for you. Tell me, what are you planning to do with the Marines? Noir raised his hand, shadows extending from his palm. I'm going to use them to put pressure on Sengoku. Guillaume looked confused. Haven't you reached an agreement yet? Noir walked past her towards the unconscious Marine officers. He began severing their shadows one by one. He might not honor his agreement. So, I'm going to show Sengoku what I've done to them. Noir had previously manipulated the celestial dragons in secret, planning to use them as leverage against the world government when he eventually rebelled against his warlord status. But Sengoku's intentions were unclear. This was a more overt move, a clear message to Sengoku to back off. Once the deal was done, Noir would return the shadows. Even if the government tried to retract the news of his warlord status, the world wouldn't believe them. Guion recognized this twisted logic. It felt strangely familiar. She laughed dryly. A convoluted and crude plan. Noir scoffed. Oh, you have a better idea? I'm all ears. Guion smiled serenely. Just kill the fleet admiral. Noir paused, momentarily considering it. No, even if I could kill Sengoku, it would only cause temporary chaos within the Marines. The power struggle between Aokiji and Akainu was unlikely to happen again. They would likely unite against him, avenging their former leader. And if Garp, enraged by Sengoku's death, took over as fleet admiral. Noir glared at Guion. You think I'd listen to you? Guion smirked inwardly. You'd totally considered it, though. After some time, Noir had severed all the shadows, replacing them with fake ones he created. When he reached Guion, she spread her arms wide, lying on the ground. Go ahead, don't hold back. Robin, standing beside Noir, bristled at Guion's provocative words. Noir, flustered by her brazenness, raised his sword and swiftly cut the connection between Guion and her shadow. He held Guion's shadow, a silhouette of her form, in his hand. Unlike the others, her shadow was surprisingly still. The moment her shadow was severed, Guion lost consciousness. Noir hesitated, then retrieved a blanket from the portal and gently covered her. He turned to find Robin staring at him with an intense, almost accusatory gaze. Noir broke out in a cold sweat, forcing a smile. What? Robin's eyes narrowed suspiciously. I didn't believe it when Perona and the others said there was something going on between you and Guion. Noir swallowed hard. There's nothing to believe. He's definitely hiding something, Robin thought. Noir's unconvincing act wouldn't fool anyone. But judging by the situation, nothing had happened between them. Robin sighed, resigned. Fine, I won't pry, just be careful. Noir grinned, relieved, and put his arm around Robin's shoulder. Don't worry, I wouldn't do anything like that. The bewitching eyes was practically every woman's worst nightmare. The ability to make anyone fall in love with just a glance, it was disturbing. He wouldn't tell Robin or any of his other female crewmates about it. With the hostage situation handled, Noir began arranging the meeting place for the exchange. As a precaution, he chose an island far from Impel Down. After making some preparations, he sent the information to Sengoku. Marine Headquarters Sengoku received Noir's message, his face breaking into a wide grin. He slammed his fist on the table and bellowed to the messenger, inform the Marine officers, proceed with the plan. The messenger saluted and hurried away. Sengoku stood by the window, a fiery glint in his eyes. Devil Noir, the world's greatest menace, would finally be dealt with. On that island, the Marines would surround and eliminate him and the entire underworld pirates crew. Not a single one would escape. Several days later, the Noidum remnants had all been safely relocated from Abrulet Island. On the blue sea, the magnificent Ark Maxim, its golden hull gleaming in the sunlight, steadily carried its crew toward their destination. Noir sat at the bow of the ship, arms crossed over his chest, eyes closed in quiet contemplation. Isho approached Noir, a note of concern in his voice. Setting out this late, the Marines have likely made thorough preparations. Noir chuckled, enjoying the cool sea breeze. It doesn't matter. Even if Sengoku pulls out all the stops for this exchange, he won't gain an advantage over me. Just then, a large figure descended from the sky. Wiper, resuming his human form after his aerial reconnaissance, landed on the deck. I've confirmed it. The Marines are already on the island. Enel, his observation hockey extended to its maximum range, frowned. There are a lot of voices and presences, a significant force. A sardonic smile played on Noir's lips. Just as I expected, Sengoku still hasn't given up. Isho shook his head, a knowing smile on his face. Unfortunately for him, he underestimates us. Sengoku hadn't accounted for Enel's world-class observation hockey range or Noir's intimate understanding of the government's tactics. The exchange was said to take place on a remote, deserted island far from Abrulet Island, a perfect location for a clandestine transaction. As the Ark Maxim slowly approached the shore, Noir and his crew disembarked, immediately drawing the attention of several Marine observation teams hidden nearby. These were just low-ranking scouts. The real question was, which high-ranking officers had the Marines dispatched? It was unlikely that Fleet Admiral Sengoku would come personally. Kizaru was out of commission, but Aokiji and Akainu should have recovered by now. Noir quickly walked to the center of the island. As expected, a large contingent of Marines had already surrounded the area. Their eyes burned with hatred, their jaws clenched tight, barely suppressing their rage. They looked ready to tear Noir apart. Well, that was to be expected. He caused considerable trouble for the admirals and the fleet admiral, kidnapped the beloved instructor Z, and, most importantly, that lecherous devil had taken Vice Admiral Momoshiki and Ain hostage. Unforgivable. Seeing their murderous glares, Noir grinned mischievously. He suddenly turned and made a silly face, shouting, "Boo!" Several Marines nearly jumped out of their skins, instinctively reaching for their weapons. A few even had their swords half drawn. As their faces contorted with fury, Noir continued to push their buttons, dancing on the edge of inciting a full-blown conflict. Just as the Marines were about to lose control, a voice cut through the tension. "Stand down, there's no need for conflict with Noir." A seasoned voice commanded. Noir turned to see familiar faces. Vice Admiral Suru, Garp, who had previously given Noir a thorough beating, and, most familiar of all. Well, if it isn't Uncle Kizaru, out for a stroll again? Noir's face lit up with a wide grin as he saw Kizaru. He jogged over, eager to chat. Kizaru leaned against a large tree, a slightly disgruntled expression on his face. Kuzan, that lazybones, is still feigning illness to avoid duty. So, the old man dragged me out here again. Noir burst out laughing, clapping Kizaru on the back. What about Akainu? Why isn't he here? Kizaru scratched his head, then replied, he's recovered. Sengoku sent him on a mission. Oh, Noir's smile turned knowing, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he pulled a yellow lollipop from his pocket and offered it to Kizaru. Care for one? Kizaru raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Sure, so sweet. Yours is nothing special. Try my cookies, I always have them on duty. The two notorious slackers huddled together, sharing snacks, while Robin and Suru watched them with exasperated expressions. Garp, intrigued, pulled out a bag of senbei crackers, hoping to join the snack party. However, a sharp glare from Suru made him quickly reconsider. Suru cleared her throat and addressed Robin, who seemed the most reasonable of the group. Have you brought the celestial dragons and the marines? Robin nodded, glancing at Noir, who was still happily indulging in snacks. A shiver ran down Noir's spine. He hurried back to his crew, then activated the underworld powers, releasing the hostages from the mirror world. Suru surveyed the group, noting their dazed and disoriented state. She frowned. They're not in good condition. Noir grinned and snapped his fingers. The hostages' consciousnesses snapped back into their bodies, thanks to Brook's control over souls. The celestial dragons immediately began wailing and begging for mercy. Marines, though pale, glared defiantly at the pirates. Z, regaining his senses, quickly scanned the area for his students. Seeing Ain and the others unharmed, he breathed a sigh of relief. Then, a familiar voice called out, Z. He turned to see his old comrades, Suru and Garp, on the other side, their faces etched with worry. Seeing them, Z straightened up, his voice strong. Don't worry, I'm fine. Noir stepped in front of Z, blocking his view. He smiled. Now's not the time for reunions, old-timer. Z's face darkened. You scoundrel, what trickery are you up to now? Noir crouched down, gripping Z's head, his voice a menacing whisper. Trickery? I'm being perfectly upfront with you. You know, I just sold you for a hefty price. Z's expression wavered, his voice trembling. What are you talking about? Noir continued, deliberately goading him. To ransom you, a defeated old man, and those other marines. Sengoku coughed up 7 billion berries per head. Z's jaw dropped in disbelief. Because of his carelessness, he had fallen into Noir's trap, costing the marines a fortune. That money could have been used to train and equip so many young marines. Seeing Z on the verge of collapse, Suru's face hardened. Shut up, return our people immediately. Noir's expression turned cold. He remained unmoved. If you're in such a hurry, bring the money. Garp stepped forward angrily. You punk, hand them over first. Suddenly, as if a switch had been flipped, Noir's temper flared. He drew his sword and plunged it into Z's stomach. Suru and Garp gasped in horror. Z cried out in pain, collapsing to his knees, blood splattering the ground. Noir's blood-stained face emerged from the shadows, his expression devoid of emotion. Understand the situation, don't try to bargain with me. Pay up. Garp gritted his teeth, fury in his voice. Damn it. Suru's face was cold, her gaze sharp as a blade as it swept over Noir. But Noir, shameless as ever, remained unmoved. Tired of the standoff, Noir brandished Devil Blade threateningly. I won't say it again. With a clenched jaw, Suru signaled to the marines behind her. A large contingent of soldiers marched forward, carrying heavy wooden chests. They set the chests down heavily, then threw open the lids, revealing a glittering hoard of gold and stacks of banknotes. Zephyr, lying wounded and helpless on the ground, felt his heart sink at the sight. The marines actually caved to pirates because of me. I don't deserve to be a marine anymore. Noir glanced at the despondent Zephyr, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. Zephyr might be old, but his combat skills and teaching abilities were still valuable assets to the Marines. Pushing him to the point where he felt he could no longer remain in the Marines was exactly what Noir wanted. Seeing Noir and his crew staring at the chests, Suru spoke coldly, "Can we have our people back now?" Noir shook his head and turned to Enel. "Enel, go check it out and bring it over." Enel nodded eagerly, rubbing his hands together before transforming into a bolt of lightning and zipping towards the chests. Garp looked at the avaricious Enel with disdain. "You recruit greedy pirates like this into your crew, devil?" Enel glared at Garp, but Noir merely chuckled. Of course, greed isn't exactly a crime for a pirate. Seeing Noir defend his crewmate, Garp snorted. "Birds of a feather." Noir ignored the taunt. Enel returned, silently nodding to confirm the ransom. Noir grinned. He gestured for Enel to bring the money over. "The Marines are true to their word, thanks." Suru's eye twitched. Noir anticipated her next words, cutting her off with a smile. "All right, let's return your people." Garp let out a silent sigh of relief. A huge weight lifted from Suru's shoulders as well. But that relief was quickly replaced by cold, hard resolve. Once the Marines have their hostages back, Devil Noir is finished. Lucci escorted the captive Marines forward, while Wiper shoved the celestial dragons out into the open. Garp and Suru immediately ordered their men to retrieve them. As soon as they were safely back in Marine custody, several of the celestial dragons began to shriek and complain. "What took you so long, you useless Marines? A former admiral captured by pirates. I'm reporting this to the Gorosei, you'll all be punished." Back in safe territory, the celestial dragons showed their true colors, berating the Marines and forgetting who had just rescued them. Shame and anger burned in the faces of the rescued Marines as they listened to the celestial dragons' insults. The blatant ingratitude of the celestial dragons sparked outrage among the Marines. Some even clenched their fists, wanting to strike back. But they were Marines, bound by discipline. They wouldn't act without orders. Zephyr, his eyes devoid of light, sat slumped on the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Ain helped her teach her up, her face etched with worry. Guillaume looked at Noir, her expression unreadable. She had already witnessed Noir's terrifying potential. He might act foolish and unreliable at times, but when provoked, he was a ruthless and cunning adversary. Guillaume sighed. Now that she was back on the side of the Marines, she didn't know when she'd see him again. Would their next encounter be on the battlefield, with swords drawn? With the hostages secured, Garp and Suru ignored the ranting celestial dragons. They exchanged a look. Suru discreetly held a Den Den Mushi behind her back, her finger hovering over a button on its shell. She pressed the button. Hidden beneath the waves surrounding the island, a fleet of warships received the signal. They surged to the surface, churning the sea into a froth as they raced towards the shore. As the lead ship crested a wave, its captain's face was revealed, a snarling Akainu, admiral of the Marines. A massive fleet surrounded the island in an instant. Enel and Isho sensed the shift immediately. "We're surrounded," Enel reported. A smirk played on Noir's lips, he'd expected this. Kizaru's claim that Akainu was on a mission was clearly a lie. He was probably sent to eliminate Noir. Noir glanced at Kizaru, who was nonchalantly whistling, hands in his pockets, feigning indifference. Suru stretched her arms, a cold smile on her face. "Pirates, your time is up." Noir shrugged. "My time's never up." The Marines' betrayal was undeniably underhanded. But if Noir were in Sengoku's position, he would have done the same, perhaps even worse. The world might see the Marines as despicable, but they had accomplished their mission, upholding their twisted sense of justice. The means didn't matter, as long as the ends were achieved. Unfortunately for them, their opponent was Noir, someone even more ruthless and cunning. A wave of intense heat washed over the island, scorching the clear sky. Akainu stood atop a surge of molten rock, his voice a ferocious roar. "Devil Noir, prepare to die." More and more Marines swarmed the island. Akainu led the charge, his attacks the most brutal, intent on turning the entire island into a sea of magma. Isho frowned, stepping forward. As the Marines watched in astonishment, he drew his sword, a blinding purple light erupting into the sky. Gravity blade. Fierce tiger. With a thunderous shout, Isho swung his sword horizontally at the approaching wave of magma. The purple light warped the space before him, twisting and distorting it. Akainu's expression changed. He struggled to maintain his balance as the massive wave of magma he'd unleashed was abruptly pushed back by an immense force. The underworld pirates remained untouched by the magma. Instead, it was the Marines following Akainu who suffered the brunt of the attack. The deflected magma rained down on them, burning flesh and bone. Screams of agony filled the air. The scene was a living hell, a nightmare of burning bodies and charred skeletons. But Akainu's expression remained unchanged. His eyes were locked on Isho, a terrifying aura radiating from him. Isho, his eyes open but revealing only white, met Akainu's gaze without flinching. Noir watched the carnage unfold behind him, his expression impassive. Then, Garp made his move. Isho's sudden intervention devastated the marine forces led by Akainu. Garp, deeply caring for his men, couldn't bear the sight of their suffering. He charged toward Noir, iron fists clenched, determined to end the battle swiftly. A gust of wind rushed towards Noir's face, but with his upgraded observation haki, he effortlessly reacted, sidestepping just as Garp's fist slammed into empty space. This kid's observation haki has gotten even sharper, Garp thought, furrowing his brow. He prepared to launch another attack, his massive fist cocked back, when Suru arrived to provide support. Faced with two seasoned veterans, Noir remained calm, feigning a sigh. "Why must we resort to violence?" he asked dramatically. As the two admirals closed in, Noir casually snapped his fingers. What? No, Garp froze mid-stride, while Suru quickly retracted her attack, both turning towards the source of the scream. A marine officer, adorned with a captain's insignia, clutched his head in agony, his face contorted in terror. Exposed to the sunlight, his skin began to sizzle and smoke. A plume of acrid smoke rose as the marine's flesh, blood, and even bone were incinerated, leaving behind only a pile of ash. Garp glared at Noir, his voice a furious roar. "What did you do?" Noir simply smiled, offering no explanation. He snapped his fingers again. As if echoing the sound, another marine screamed in agony, suffering the same gruesome fate as the first. Suru's eyes widened in realization as she glanced at the marine's shadows. "The shadow fruit," she exclaimed, her voice grim. Noir marked the hostages beforehand. Noir's smile widened. "Indeed. A precaution against your predictable tactics, just as planned." Garp's face serious. He turned to Suru, his voice low. "What do we do now?" Suru's eyes flickered with thought. There was only one solution. Eliminate Devil Noir, the world's greatest menace. But Noir possessed not only the shadow fruit but also the glint fruit and the ability to vanish into mist. Kizaru, along with Garp and Suru, could at best stall Noir and his crew, preventing them from escaping into the mist, but they couldn't stop him from snapping his fingers. Seeing the two marine pillars hesitate, Noir continued snapping his fingers, each snap punctuated by another marine's agonizing death. The crisp, faint sounds cut through the din of battle, each one a chilling reminder of the power Noir held over their comrades' lives. Noir didn't pressure them for a decision, silently claiming the lives of one marine after another. The celestial dragons, who had been so arrogant before, now trembled, hiding behind the marines, fearing they would be next. But their fear was misplaced. Noir was targeting marine officers to weaken their forces. The celestial dragons were expendable. They posed no threat to him. As more marines perished, Suru's eyes filled with tears. After a moment of agonizing hesitation, she lowered her hands. "Stop, Noir," she said, her voice heavy with weariness. "You can leave." Garp, his hand resting supportively on Suru's shoulder, glared at Noir, his fists clenching and unclenching. Noir stopped snapping his fingers. He looked at Suru. "Let us leave safely and the marines' shadows will return to them unharmed." He knew when to stop. He had achieved his objective. Further provocation would only corner Garp and Suru, forcing them into a desperate, potentially fatal counterattack. Suru raised her hand, her face etched with sorrow, and addressed the remaining marines. "Let them go." Akainu, locked in a fierce battle with the equally powerful Isho, roared in protest. "Why? We can capture them all." Suru offered a bitter smile. "Capture them all? At what cost?" Sacrificing Zephyr, countless elite marines, and even celestial dragons for a chance to capture Noir, a chance that wasn't even guaranteed. The marines had lost this battle from the start. Noir smirked. He hadn't come so brazenly without a plan. Besides holding the marines hostage with their shadows, he had. A ripple appeared in the air, and a shimmering, transparent doorway opened, revealing a figure stepping through. Bluno, having opened the air door, bowed slightly to Noir. "Captain, as scheduled, I've come." Noir nodded. "Where's the Maxim?" Bluno grinned, giving a thumbs up. "Transported, don't worry." Bringing the Arc Maxim to a sheltered island had been a ploy to lower Suru's guard. There was no need to use it for their escape. Noir had arranged for Bluno's timely arrival, ensuring a swift getaway. The sight of the door fruit user deepened the bitterness in Suru's heart. The underworld pirates weren't just strong, they were masters of escape. Air doors, lightning, light speed, a pteranodon, and mysterious black mist, their diverse and unpredictable escape methods were a nightmare for the modern marines. Under the watchful eyes of the marines, Enel and the others began loading treasure chests onto the ship, a mountain of belly vanishing into the portal. Noir, practically drooling with greed, oversaw the transport of his spoils. As for the ransom for the marines whose shadows he'd stolen, well, he wasn't about to pay them a single belly. Transporting the vast fortune took considerable time. Once finished, Noir turned to the marine officers, a wide smile on his face. Well then, farewell. Akainu, his eyes bloodshot with fury, roared at the departing pirates, stop. Who would listen to him? Noir spun around, slashing with Devil Blade. A massive wave of black energy hurtled toward Akainu. Akainu reacted swiftly, transforming into magma to evade the attack, but the force of the slash still sent him staggering backward. The underworld pirates quickly stepped through the air door. Noir, standing within the portal, waved mockingly at Akainu. Don't bother, scene is out, bye-bye. Enraged, Akainu unleashed a magma hound, but the air door slammed shut, missing even a shred of Noir's clothing. Kizaru, who had been observing the chaos from a safe distance, sighed inwardly as he watched the enraged Akainu and the dissipating shockwave. Of all the people to fight, you chose the one with the sharpest tongue. The mission was a failure, and a heavy gloom settled over the Marines. They felt a deep sense of frustration and helplessness. Only Kizaru felt no surprise. As the admiral who had clashed with Noir the most, he understood the pirate captain's cunning better than anyone. If Noir could be caught by a plan like this, Kizaru wouldn't have to work so much overtime. Noir and the underworld pirates, laden with countless belly, successfully escaped the Marines' encirclement. As soon as Bluno opened another air door, Enel and the others excitedly carried out large wooden chests, transporting them into the underworld. Noir watched Enel zipping around, tongue lolling out, and chuckled. Finally got rid of those ticking time bombs. Robin smiled faintly. Yes, but that also means we've lost our leverage over the Marines and the world government. Noir scoffed. Sengoku and the Gorosei have short memories, they'll be scheming against me again soon enough. Robin nodded. After losing so many men because of your shadow trick, Sengoku has to deal with the fallout first. Noir shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. True, he'll probably be calling me again before long. Just as he spoke, Lucci approached quietly, holding out a transponder snail. A call from Fleet Admiral Sengoku, he reported. Noir and Robin exchanged glances, a shared look of amusement in their eyes. That was fast. Robin chuckled and patted Noir's shoulder. I'll check on the Noidum refugees. You handle this, private conversation. Noir grinned and took the transponder snail, putting the receiver to his ear. Meow, meow, he said mockingly. Sengoku's usually calm voice was now laced with barely suppressed fury. Why did you attack the hostages? We paid the ransom in full. Noir countered with a chillingly calm question of his own. Why did you attack me? Perhaps you should explain why the Marines attacked me first. Sengoku was momentarily speechless. Noir pressed his advantage, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I was merely taking precautions. I'm surprised I actually had to use them. So, the self-proclaimed righteous Marines resort to underhanded pirate tactics? Sengoku gritted his teeth, struggling to contain his rage. It was a misunderstanding. We were sincere in our invitation for you to join the Seven Warlords. A sly smile spread across Noir's face. Oh, were you, now? Sengoku closed his eyes, a wave of weariness washing over him. We were wrong, Mr. Noir, he admitted, his voice heavy with resignation. Please, return the Marine shadows. Noir laughed, his mockery undisguised. How generous of you to ask, Fleet Admiral. Sengoku sighed, about to explain, when Noir interrupted him again. I'm willing to return their shadows, but that will come at a price. Sengoku nearly choked, his voice rising. We're not giving you any more money. On the other end of the line, Noir smiled silently. This was the reaction he'd been aiming for. If not money, Noir continued smoothly, then perhaps something else. You know, as a newly appointed warlord, I require territory. Sengoku's eye twitched. He frowned, his mind racing. With Devil Noir's power, he could seize any territory he wanted. Why ask for it? There could only be one explanation. Noir wanted a location under Marine or world government control, or one with significant connections to them. Sengoku, careful not to reveal his thoughts, asked, where do you propose to establish your territory? Noir's voice was calm and steady. The ruins of a fallen kingdom, the kingdom of Noidum. I hear you've occupied the island. Sengoku's heart skipped a beat. The ancient kingdom of Noidum, a kingdom tied to the mysterious D clan. After all these years, why would anyone bring up that place? How did Noir even know about it? He was too young to remember those events. But wait, Noir's surname was Kairos. And he carried the initial, D. Weren't those hallmarks of Noidum royalty? Could Devil Noir, the notorious pirate making waves across the Grand Line, be a descendant of that ancient kingdom's royal family? Sengoku's mind raced, piecing together the clues. Noidum's downfall was due to their dangerous research, something the world government feared. Sengoku, a staunch traditionalist, believed Noidum's destruction was justified. The operation had been thorough. While some commoners might have survived, the nobility was believed to have been completely eradicated. So, where did this Kairos D Noir come from? Sengoku cursed himself for not investigating Noir's background more thoroughly. On the other end of the line, Noir grew impatient. Well, are you going to answer? Will you give me the island or not? If not, the Marines keep their shadows, and I'll take Noitum by force. Sweat beaded on Sengoku's forehead. He couldn't make this decision lightly. Their relationship with Noir was precarious. The warlord title was a flimsy truce, but neither side truly trusted the other. The government still wanted Noir eliminated, but his hostage tactics made direct action risky. The island of Noitum, occupied for years, had been thoroughly stripped of anything valuable: research data, treasures, historical artifacts, even skilled individuals. Logically, handing it over to Noir shouldn't be a problem, but Sengoku, having dealt with Noir's shrewd bargaining before, was hesitant to agree. After a moment of agonizing deliberation, Sengoku said, "I can't make that decision. I need to consult my superiors." Noir grumbled impatiently and sat down to wait. While he could take Noitum by force, a peaceful acquisition would be more legitimate and less troublesome. Just as Noir assumed the consultation would be a silent affair, Sengoku's voice returned, sounding more confident. "We agree to cede the island of Noitum to you, but in return, you must return the shadows you stole from the Marines." Noir was surprised by the swift decision. It seemed the Marines and the world government were confident they'd already taken everything of value from Noitum. Even if the world government had scrubbed Noitum clean, Noir was determined to return. It held the only clues to his past, a past he needed to understand. Seeing Sengoku's swift agreement, a triumphant smile spread across Noir's face. "Deal. Their shadows will be returned shortly." Sengoku narrowed his eyes. "And the celestial dragon's shadows as well. Return them all." Noir, anticipating this, calmly replied, his expression unchanged. "What? Oh, I didn't take their shadows. Just the Marines." He was lying through his teeth, but Sengoku had no way to confirm it. His question was a mere probe, a fishing expedition. While the Marine hostages were freed, the celestial dragons were likely still under Noir's control. Even the world government, lacking shadow manipulation abilities, couldn't tell if they'd been tampered with. Sengoku was certain Noir had taken their shadows too, but he lacked proof, and even with proof, what could he do? Knowing he wouldn't get anywhere, Sengoku sighed. "Very well. Return the Marines' shadows first, then." Noir chuckled. "Certainly, it's been a pleasure doing business with you." He hung up, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He stood up and snapped his fingers. Shadowy figures detached from his hand, soaring into the air and vanishing. He'd kept his word about the Marines' shadows. The rest were easy targets. The only real threats were Zephyr and Suru. Zephyr, after his devastating loss, might not even remain in the Marines. As for Gion, Noir still wasn't sure how to handle her. She knew him too well. If she became an enemy, she could make his life very difficult. But in her current state, influenced by his ability, she probably wouldn't be a problem. At least, he hoped so. With the shadows returned, Noir focused on the journey to Noitum. Taking the eternal pose to Noitum from Riha, he and his crew boarded the Arc Maxim and set course. Noir relaxed on a deck chair, expensive sunglasses shielding his eyes, a large cigar clenched between his teeth, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur. His crew lounged on similar chairs, basking in the sun. Wiper gazed at the clear blue sky, a sigh escaping his lips. "After all this time in the blue sea, we finally have our own territory." Enel, sporting flashy pink sunglasses, grinned. "When we get to Noitum, I'm going to be king." Lucci rolled his eyes. "You don't make me laugh." Enel crackled with blue electricity, about to lunge at Lucci, when Wiper, caught in the crossfire, sighed and intervened. Isho, observing the commotion, sipped his green tea and smiled serenely. "Ah, to be young again." Noir watched them, shaking his head in amusement. "Your Highness, your juice." A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Riha, ever attentive, standing beside him with a glass of juice. Since Riha had joined them, Noir had been constantly reminded of his royal status. Riha was the perfect retainer, even more meticulous than Robin in his care. Noir accepted the juice with a smile. "Thanks, Riha." Riha bowed his head respectfully. "It is my duty, your highness." Noir took a long drink, then asked curiously, "I heard Noitum had a unique feature, dragon breeding. Do you know anything about that?" Riha's eyes lit up, his voice filled with pride. "They're unique, sentient dragon-like creatures, known as dragon vassals." Dragon vassals. An intriguing name. "But why didn't I see any dragon vassals at your base?" Noir asked, puzzled. Riha's expression darkened. He sighed. "The dragon vassals reside in underwater nests within Noitum's territory. We couldn't reach them." He pulled out a worn, yellowed parchment, pointing to the faded writing. "This is an ancient record of the dragon vassals." Noir squinted at the text, deciphering the relationship between these creatures and Noitum. Essentially, it was a close partnership. Each Noitum noble, upon reaching adulthood, would be paired with a dragon vassal, forming a lifelong bond. The noble gained protection and companionship, while the dragon vassal gained access to knowledge and skills from the human world. This mutually beneficial relationship had been shattered with Noitam's downfall. Only nobles and highly decorated officials possessed dragon vassals. Riha and the others, commoners, did not. Noir suddenly understood. So, those mechanical dragons on Abrulet Island, you built them based on the dragon vassals? Riha nodded, his voice laced with disappointment. Unfortunately, we could never replicate the true form of the dragon vassals. Though he'd never seen one, Riha's reverence piqued Noir's curiosity. Once they reached Noitam, he would capture a dragon vassal, preferably the strongest one. As Noir and his crew sailed towards Noitam, a strange phenomenon occurred above Marine headquarters. A thick, black cloud gathered over Marineford, gradually releasing shadows that drifted away in different directions. Within Marineford, numerous officers felt a sudden sense of wholeness as their true shadows returned. Sengoku, standing by the window, listened to his aide's report, a weight lifting from his shoulders. With their key personnel restored, there was finally some good news. What about the investigation into Noitam? Sengoku asked, his gaze fixed on his aide. The aide consulted the stack of papers in his hand. I've reviewed the battle records from Noitam's destruction. The Marines did eliminate all the nobles. The body count was accurate. Sengoku frowned, confused. If Noir wasn't a Noitam noble, why make such a request? His age didn't match the timeline either. Perhaps a noble had escaped and later had a child, but the record showed no survivors. Something didn't add up. The kingdom of Noitam was located in the middle front section of the New World, meaning Noir and his crew had a long journey ahead of them. Fortunately, their ship was the Ark Maxim. With Enel working tirelessly through several nights, fueled by who knows what, they finally caught sight of an island. The island of the Noitam kingdom was called Noitam, a land with 4 distinct seasons, allowing a variety of crops and animals to thrive. Noitam was also quite large. Including the surrounding archipelago, Noitam's territory was comparable in size to the desert kingdom Alabasta that Noir had previously visited. Riha leaned over the railing, tears welling in his eyes as he gazed at his long-lost homeland. As they drew closer, the kingdom of Noitam came into view. As Noir expected, the island was a desolate wasteland, strewn with ruins and debris. The ubiquitous crumbling walls spoke volumes about the tragedy that had befallen this place. Riha spoke with a tremor in his voice, the once great kingdom is now nothing but a memory. Noir frowned. The island was practically a wasteland. No wonder the Marines and the world government had so readily relinquished it. The Ark Maxim docked at the shore. Noir and his companions disembarked, with Riha rushing ahead. Thud, Riha dropped to his knees, heedless of the dirt and grime, and touched the ground with trembling hands, his voice thick with emotion. Noitam, after 20 long years. We're back. We're finally back. Ha ha ha. Noir watched Riha's unrestrained display of emotion with a gentle smile. To witness the destruction of his beloved country in his youth and endure 20 years in hiding, no one could truly understand Riha's feelings at this moment. TCH, pirates will be pirates. Disgusting, a chill ran down Noir's spine, his eyes narrowing as he turned to the source of the voice. A tall, muscular man in a white suit, his muscles straining against the fabric, stood with a group of underlings, sneering at them. Government agents, huh? Probably here to hand over the island. The man's sneering voice was loud, but Riha ignored him, his face still radiant with joy, seemingly oblivious to the insult. Riha might not care, but Noir wasn't so forgiving. Noir strolled towards the man, hands in his pockets, his gaze cold. Repeat what you just said. The man blinked, then burst into laughter. Towering over Noir, he reached out and grabbed his collar. What, you got a problem with it? I'm a world government agent. If you hurt me, you can kiss off this island you so pathetically begged for goodbye. Noitam, something he pathetically begged for? Hey, no wonder this guy is so cocky. He was probably too low-ranking. The Gorosei likely hadn't informed him of Noir's exploits, so he assumed Noir was just some pirate groveling to the government. Noir chuckled, his voice dripping with irony. You don't even know who I am, and you dare to take on this assignment. The man paused. He had indeed been in isolation at a government training facility and was unfamiliar with this up-and-coming pirate. When he accepted the mission, he had noticed the strange looks from his colleagues. Now that he thought about it, those looks seemed to be a mixture of pity, schadenfreude, and condolences? The man shook his head, dismissing the unsettling thought, and tightened his grip on Noir's collar. Cut the crap. Who the hell do you think you are? Huh? Why should I know you? Noir shook his head, muttering to himself, ignorance is bliss, what a load of crap. Robin, ever perceptive, emerged from behind Noir, cradling the blood-red cursed blade, Devil Blade, in her arms. Noir smiled coldly and reached for the sword. An aura of infernal energy erupted from the blade. In an instant, the man's eyes widened in pain, his vision flooded with a searing crimson as his arms were severed. Ah! Noir sheathed devil blade casually and brushed off his clothes, looking down at the man writhing in agony on the ground. He calmly instructed, "Entertain our guest. And since they're useless, remove his teeth and tongue." Upon hearing their captain's command, Enel and Wiper exchanged a disgusted look before turning away. The women, needless to say, were even less inclined. In the end, the dirty work fell to Lucci. Lucci sighed in resignation, pulling on a fresh pair of white gloves. "Fine. I'll handle it," he said curtly. Noir nodded and patted Riha on the shoulder. "Let's go. We have an island to explore." Riha quickly wiped his tears and nodded. "Yes, but..." Seeing Riha's concern as Lucci pried open the man's mouth, Noir reassured him, "Don't worry. As long as he doesn't die, the government won't make a fuss." Riha nodded, following obediently behind Noir. The man's screams echoed in the air, but Noir remained unmoved. Some people just had a death wish. Noir was merely obliging him. Arrogant, blind, and full of trash talk, Noir had encountered plenty of such individuals, and none had met a good end. With Riha's guidance, they navigated the ruins. Noitum was comparable in size to Alabasta. Riha led them to the former capital of Noitum, a city called Enel. According to Riha, Enel had suffered the least damage after Noitum's fall. Because many classified doents, important research, and treasures were located in the capital, it became the Marines and the government's base on Noitum after the war. Rebuilding Noitum from the capital was the most logical choice. Due to Noitum's vast territory, the journey would take too long, so Noir decided to call for backup. He shook the underworld mirror, and a bewildered Bluno, who had been directing the crew in transporting supplies within the underworld portal, suddenly found himself teleported to Noir's side. Noir grinned. "We need your help to get around. Think you can manage it?" This was the power of the underworld dimension. To an outside observer, Noir was alone. But in reality, he could summon a small army with a flick of his wrist. However, staying in the underworld also restricted the freedom of those inside, which is why Noir was so eager to establish his own territory. He couldn't keep people cooped up in that dark, sunless world forever. Bluno, after hearing Noir's explanation, understood and confidently rolled up his sleeves. "Leave it to me. I'll get you there in a flash." The air door rippled and Noir's group stepped through. Moments later, another air door materialized on a different part of Noitum. The air door materialized slowly in a street within the ruins of the former capital, Enel. Noir and his crew stepped out into the desolate city. Enel was in ruins, though as Riha had said, it was in better condition than other parts of the island. The streets were relatively clear, and some buildings remained partially intact, hinting at the former glory of Noitum. Stepping out of the air door, Noir surveyed his surroundings. Not bad. Enel is relatively intact. Riha, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and nostalgia, nodded. The government and Marines used this area for years. They wouldn't have let it fall into complete disrepair. He pointed ahead. "Your Highness, the royal palace is that way. Please, follow me." Noir nodded, and they walked through the ruined streets until they reached an imposing wall, a single, massive gate providing the only entrance. He found the familiar style appealing, though it was a shame that so much of it had been destroyed. Riha led them through the gate, explaining, "The palace's interior is completely ruined. It's no longer fit for a ruler." Noir wasn't concerned. "It's fine. Any room will do for now. We're all seasoned adventurers. Who cares about fancy accommodations?" Noir's casual attitude, however, elicited a shocked reaction from Riha, who exclaimed, "Absolutely not. If your highness is to rebuild Noitum, you will be its new king. You cannot reside in such squalor." Noir shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. All right. We'll build a new palace later, then." Riha relaxed, relieved. He led Noir into the palace's interior. The inner palace was more ornate than the exterior but lacked the same grandeur and imposing presence. Riha led him on a tour, but they found nothing of personal significance to Noir. They discovered some nobles' records, but they contained only mundane administrative details from past rulers. Noir examined the doents, but they offered no clues or insights, just ordinary records of governance and the state of the kingdom. He wasn't an expert in these matters, so he handed them to Robin for analysis. After a thorough search, Noir found no clues about his own past in the ruins. "The Marines and the government really cleaned this place out," he muttered, a hint of frustration in his voice, though he'd anticipated this outcome. Seeing Riha's excitement, however, Noir put aside his disappointment. They had secured a large territory. That was a good start. He clapped Riha on the shoulder, a grin spreading across his face. "All right, we've seen enough. Time to get to work." Riha's eyes lit up. "Yes, your highness." Night had fallen. Dark clouds blanketed the sky, not a single star visible, as if even they feared the oppressive darkness. On the roof of a ruined palace building, Noir held the underworld mirror aloft. Beams of light streamed out, illuminating the surrounding area like miniature suns. Countless points of light, like stars in the dark night, revealed themselves to be people emerging into the open. The remnants of Noitum and the escapees from Mary Joieuse were finally released. When the Noitum remnants saw their surroundings, they were stunned. They looked at Noir and Riha in disbelief. Soon, a cry arose from the crowd, a cry that had been suppressed for years. "It's an L. We're home. There are no enemies. Has His Highness reclaimed this place? All hail the prince. All hail the prince." The people of Noitum wept, embracing each other, some falling to their knees in gratitude to Noir for bringing them home. The escapees from Mary Joieuse, having grown close to the Noitum remnants during their shared ordeal, were deeply moved. They, too, raised their hands and cheered, their voices joining the chorus of celebration. Anel, silent for so many years, was reawakened by the voices of these people who had been forced to wander for so long. Noir stood on the rooftop, a confident smirk on his face, and addressed the crowd below. "My friends. Noitum is ours again. Now, let us rebuild our home together, starting with the capital." "Ooh!" The crowd roared its approval, their voices filled with renewed hope and determination. Noir smiled, nodding in satisfaction. Though the population of the new Noitum was small, in the world of pirates, strength was everything. With his reputation as a warlord, he could attract those seeking refuge. His actions in freeing slaves had also earned him a certain notoriety. A thought struck Noir. He could raid more slave ships, enhancing his image as a savior, and attracting more loyal followers, both slaves and virtuous individuals, to his kingdom. Noir waved his hand, and more figures emerged from the portal. "These guys will help you during the night." The crowd cheered, recognizing the figures. "It's the lovely zombies." Noir's smile faltered. Lovely? Had their prolonged exposure to the zombies warped their sense of aesthetics, just like Robin's? The people embraced the zombies like old friends. The zombies, creations of the Cage no Mi and thus loyal to Noir, showed no hostility towards the people. Having spent so much time together in the underworld, the people and the zombies had grown accustomed to each other. "Everyone here is skilled. Rebuilding the capital will be swift," Riha said, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Noir nodded, his mind already racing with plans. Then, a sudden thought struck him. Right, the Sky Island. The people nearby, startled by his outburst, looked at him in confusion. Enel and Wiper asked in unison, "What Sky Island?" Noir didn't answer, instead focusing on the system reward he'd received after encountering Enel on Skypia. The system had granted him the ability to create a custom Sky Island. He'd saved it, and now was the perfect time to use it. A Sky Island above Noitum could serve as a hidden base for research, training, or even. Noir's eyes gleamed. He could build a palace in the sky. Since Noir declared the rebuilding of the long-abandoned capital, Enel, the sounds of bustling activity echoed through the ruins every day. The reconstruction had already begun to take shape. In just a few days, the debris and wreckage had been cleared from the capital. The streets and buildings were now clean, and people busily worked with their tools. Noir envisioned the capital as the heart of the reborn kingdom, a place that needed to be truly exceptional. Fortunately, among the people Noir had rescued were skilled builders and master designers. They had quickly drafted blueprints for the capital's reconstruction, which Noir had personally approved. Highly satisfied with the designs, Noir confidently delegated the construction to his trusted crew. He, meanwhile, had found a suitable location to unleash a long-awaited reward. Standing in a large open space within the ruins of the old royal palace, Noir pressed his hand against the ground. Enel watched him curiously. "Where are you up to, Captain?" Wiper shook his head. "He called us here, saying we were going to a Sky Island. But I've looked all over, and there's no Sky Island in sight." Robin smiled softly, her gaze fixed on Noir. "You two still don't know him well enough, do you?" Enel and Wiper exchanged a look, then chuckled. "True. I probably wouldn't even be surprised if he conjured a Sky Island out of thin air." As they whispered among themselves, Noir focused his mind, navigating the system's interface to select the Sky Island. Confirm generation of custom Sky Island? Warning, generation is irreversible. Noir closed his eyes, his voice firm. Confirm generation, directly above this location. The system's mechanical voice responded, adjusting altitude, area, and environmental compatibility. Generation successful. Noir's eyes snapped open, and he looked up eagerly. But the sky remained a clear, cloudless blue. Huh? So, where did the Sky Island go? As Noir puzzled over the island's whereabouts, Enel suddenly cried out, his face contorted in shock. "What is that? How is that possible?" In Enel's mind's eye, through his observation hockey, a massive object had materialized in the space above them without any warning. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. He pointed towards the sky, shouting, "Something's appeared, way up high." At his words, the crew of the underworld pirates tensed, forming a defensive circle. Isho focused his senses, but the details in the sky remained hazy. Noir looked up, bewildered. The island had been generated, but why couldn't he, its owner, sense it at all? Just then, the system's voice chimed in, "Host, your custom Sky Island is remotely controllable. The control hub has been transferred to your spatial storage." Remotely controllable? Noir was taken aback. He quickly focused his mind, and sure enough, he found a small, fist-sized sphere within his system inventory. The sphere seemed to be made of solidified clouds, cool to the touch. As he held it, he felt a faint connection to something distant. Noir gripped the sphere, willing the connected Sky Island to move. "Something's approaching," Isho murmured, a slight frown creasing his brow as he tilted his head, listening intently to the sky. Enel waved his arms frantically. "The Sky Island is falling." As he spoke, the bright sky darkened. The people working in Enel stopped what they were doing and looked up. Riha, now dressed in work clothes, stammered in a serious tone, "Is this the end of the world?" Above Enel, an island made of soft, white clouds had appeared, its sheer size comparable to the capital itself. Noir's mouth twitched. He stared at the sphere in his hand. This thing actually works. A remotely controllable Sky Island was the perfect base for the underworld pirates. Enel and Wiper stared, dumbfounded, at the Sky Island now within sight. He really did just conjure up a Sky Island. Noir turned to Riha outside. "Calm everyone down. I'm going up to take a look." Riha nodded quickly. Noir gathered Robin in his arms and transformed into a bolt of golden lightning, shooting up towards the clouds. Enel and the others quickly followed, landing on the Sky Island. As soon as Noir's feet touched the white ground, he felt a strange sense of familiarity. He smiled. "Not bad, this feels right." Wiper rolled around excitedly on the cloud surface. "This feeling, it's been too long." Although the deck of the Arc Maxim was also covered with a layer of island cloud, stepping onto a true Sky Island held a special significance for Wiper, a native of Skypia. Enel, however, looked around with a hint of disappointment. "It's so empty, there's nothing here." Konus, also from Skypia, frowned. "True, without houses or streets, it feels lifeless." Noir grinned. "That's an easy fix. We'll build a palace here in no time." Robin shook her head, smiling. "That aside, I'm more curious about how you created a Sky Island in the first place." Noir scratched his head, holding up the white sphere. "I found this a while back. Apparently, it can control this island." Trusting Noir implicitly, Robin accepted his explanation without question. "How strange." Enel, overhearing their conversation, asked eagerly, "That's amazing, can we use it too?" Noir shook his head, unsure. Enel quickly snatched the sphere from him. As soon as Enel held the sphere, the Sky Island trembled violently. Noir watched in surprise. So, others could use it besides him? What happened to exclusive Sky Island? Huh? Before Noir could dwell on his irritation, Enel's face turned pale, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood, his body swaying precariously. Wiper rushed to catch him. "What's wrong?" Enel clutched his head, wiping the blood from his mouth. "I'm fine. This sphere drains your energy. It almost sucked me dry." Noir was stunned. It drained energy? He hadn't felt anything when he used it. Of course, the system's gifts would have an owner recognition protocol. Noir quickly took the sphere back. It seemed he was the only one who could safely control it. That was fine by him. If even Enel suffered such backlash, ordinary people would be in even greater danger if they tried to move the Sky Island. After Enel tested the white sphere's ability, Fujitora brought Riha up to the Sky Island. Riha, seeing the Sky Island for the first time, marveled, "So this is a Sky Island. It's beautiful." Noir, hands on his hips, surveyed the empty expanse. "It is beautiful. And it'll be even more so once we build a palace." Riha, taking in the dreamlike scenery, nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. A palace in the sky would be a fitting symbol for your highness." Noir chuckled, tossing the white sphere to Riha. "Have this fashioned into a scepter. It controls this island." Riha caught the sphere, his eyes wide with surprise. He cradled it carefully. "I understand. This scepter will become a symbol of the kingdom of Noitam's ruler." Noir nodded, then frowned. "But how do we handle transportation between the Sky Island and the ground?" Lucci interjected. "Bluno's ability could help." Noir waved his hand dismissively. "Are you trying to work Bluno to death?" Lucci shook his head, and Riha explained, "No, it's one of Curry's research projects." Noir was surprised. Curry? He remembered assigning Curry to focus on Devil Fruit and Iron Man suit research after they arrived at Noitam. Had she made progress so quickly? Seeing Noir's questioning look, Riha quickly explained. Curry had been researching spatial portals for some time, but she hadn't made much headway until she encountered Mr. Bluno. By studying the Doa Doa no Mi, Curry has created a rudimentary device capable of short-range teleportation. Everyone was shocked, but Noir was overjoyed. He hadn't misjudged Curry. In such a short time, she had delivered a huge breakthrough. It was fortunate that the Marines and the world government hadn't focused their attention on Bluno. If Vegapunk had gotten his hands on him, spatial portals might already be a reality. What a lucky find, Noir relaxed. That solves it, then. We'll build the palace here. We can also relocate some of Noitam's and the Underworld's key personnel and facilities here, like Curry and her lab. Riha, full of enthusiasm, pounded his chest. I will oversee the construction of the most magnificent palace. Though Noitam was in ruins, Noir had amassed a considerable fortune, enough to fund the kingdom's development for a good while. He was more than willing to spend the necessary belly to construct a grand royal palace. Besides, if they ran out of money, he could always acquire more. He was a pirate, after all, and he now possessed the legal right to plunder as a warlord. Again, as long as the ruler was powerful, funds would never be an issue. Robin looked up at the empty Sky Island, her eyes filled with anticipation. I can't wait to see Noitam when it's finished. Noir nodded, gazing intently into Robin's eyes. This time, I'm here. The tragedies of Noitam and O'Hara will not be repeated. Robin stared at him for a moment, then gently placed a finger on his lips, a soft smile gracing her features. Silly, of course not. Enel scratched his head, completely missing the atmosphere. So, what are we going to call this palace? Robin, her interest piqued, offered, I have an idea. Everyone turned to her. Robin announced proudly, how about the Palace of the Celestial Summit? Wiper's eyes lit up. Not bad, it fits the Sky Island setting perfectly. Enel nodded in agreement. Indeed, it's a surprisingly normal name coming from you, big sis Robin. At that, Robin shot him a withering glare, and Enel instantly shut his mouth. While everyone else seemed to approve, Noir felt a chill run down his spine. The name reminded him of a certain Tomb Raiding movie. If they really used that name, and he lived in the palace, wouldn't it be like living in a giant tomb? Leave it to Robin to come up with a name that sounded nice but had such ominous undertones. Noir forced a smile and interrupted their discussion. The name's too complicated. Let's just call it the Cloud Palace. Since their leader had spoken, the others, though hesitant, didn't object. Robin, however, pouted, clearly unhappy that her suggestion had been rejected again. Everyone else discreetly glanced at Noir, who, ignoring their looks, awkwardly shuffled over to Robin. He crouched beside her, sweating profusely as he tried to explain himself. Though, in truth, he wasn't even sure what he had done wrong. The rest of the crew watched them, identical knowing smiles on their faces. Lucci expertly produced a table, chairs, and a large watermelon. Wiper, cradling the watermelon, sat down and sighed. That captain of ours is so dense. Why doesn't he just confess already? Riha hesitated, then ventured, perhaps, he's shy? At that, everyone turned to stare at Riha as if he were an alien. They chorused, the captain? Shy? Riha fell silent. Though he hadn't known Noir for long, he could tell. His Highness's skin was, well, thick. Enel, his mouth full of watermelon, spat out a seed and mumbled, that's not dense. That's just plain stupid. Lucci subtly shifted away from Enel. Be careful, the captain might hear you. Enel scoffed, then lowered his head to continue devouring the watermelon, his posture a strange mix of arrogance and cowardice. While their peanut gallery continued its commentary, and a certain beauty still seemed upset, Noir, being a man of action, was focused on more important matters. The new Noitam was still in its infancy. Its internal strength was weak, and it needed capable individuals to establish its authority. Noir's political skills were atrocious, but he could at least imitate the practices of his predecessors. Though time was of the essence, he decided to start by recruiting talented individuals within the kingdom to ease the burden on himself and Riha. He planned to appoint ministers to oversee the various departments of Noitam's government, and then he could comfortably take a backseat. After all, as long as Noir maintained his overwhelming strength, rebellion and betrayal were highly unlikely in the world of One Piece. Before, Noir hadn't realized the sheer number of people he was carrying. Now, having released nearly 20,000 people, the reality of his responsibility sunk in. While this was a small number compared to the world's great powers, it was a significant population for a newly established kingdom. As for the now empty underworld dimension, Noir planned to repurpose it as a large prison. He'd also released Hogback and Perona, remnants of Moria's crew whom he'd defeated earlier. Noir believed Hogback's advanced medical knowledge and research on human anatomy could be useful. And since his loyalty to Moria was weaker than Perona's, Noir had boldly released him, persuading him to assist with research. As for Perona, she remained fiercely loyal to Moria. She had stayed with Noir for a while now and had only warmed up to some of the women in the underworld pirates. Given the underworld pirates' previous kindness to her, and Perona's naturally eccentric personality, this wasn't surprising. As long as she didn't cause trouble and cooperated with Curry's research, Noir was content to leave her be. Starting a new kingdom was a daunting task, and initially, everything was chaotic. But after a period of intense work, the situation had drastically improved. Wide, clean streets began to take shape, stretching out in all directions in an organized grid. Unique buildings, unlike anything seen elsewhere in this world, rose from the ground. Noir had initially overwhelmed his architects with his wild ideas for construction. They had no idea what he meant by earthen buildings, fortified towers, courtyard houses, or even Moorish manors. Only after many detailed discussions and clarifications were the architects able to produce a satisfactory design. High above, Wiper, transformed into a giant winged dragon, circled in the air. Noir sat cross-legged on his back, surveying the city with satisfaction. While not a perfect replica of his vision, the city had developed its own unique style, avoiding any sense of incongruity. It was this feeling that made Noir feel increasingly connected to the burgeoning capital of Enel. In addition to the construction, Noir and his crew had decided to further divide the capital into distinct zones: residential, commercial, entertainment, and so on. It might seem premature, but with the kingdom's currently small population, there was no need to develop the entire island of Noir just yet. They could focus on creating a high quality of life in the capital. Moreover, Riha, Curry, and their group had accumulated advanced living standards over the years, including efficient farming and food production techniques. Looking at the vibrant new empire taking shape below, Wiper, soaring through the air, remarked, "This country, it feels really good." Noir focused his senses, feeling the gentle breeze on his face, a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. It's all thanks to everyone's hard work. Creating a peaceful haven for these displaced people in this cruel world, it was a good feeling. Wiper tilted his draconic head, looking back at Noir. "It is. But the kingdom still lacks administrative talent. Mr. Riha has no one to help him." Noir nodded in agreement. He had been working closely with Riha these days, handling issues that arose and finding solutions. They were both constantly busy, so much so that even Enel and Lucci had been drafted to help. Running a kingdom was far more complex. Riha wasn't a seasoned administrator, and Noir was even less so. Noir sighed. Luckily, Khalifa and Robin are incredibly capable. They can process mountains of information simultaneously. Wiper nodded silently, then hesitated, a worried look on his face. "But we snuck out. Won't Big Sis and Khalifa be angry?" Noir swallowed, his voice uncertain. "Probably not." Wiper's eyes widened. Probably, he had followed the captain's suggestion to sneak out for this undercover inspection of the kingdom. "Your Highness, Wiper-sama, we have a situation." Wiper's ears twitched. "Someone's calling us." Noir leaned over, pointing below. "He's calling us." A man on the ground was waving frantically, shouting something. He appeared to be injured, with blood dripping from his wounds. They quickly descended. Noir hopped off Wiper's back and asked, "What's going on?" The man grabbed Noir's arm, gasping for breath. "Someone's invaded the island's waters. They attacked our scouts." Noir's expression hardened. An invasion at a time like this? After securing ownership of Noitum Island from the world government, Noir had sent messengers to inform nearby kingdoms of Noitum's re-establishment. Wiper helped the man up, frowning. "Who are they? Pirates?" The man shook his head. "I don't think so, their ships don't have any Jolly Rogers." Noir was puzzled. Not pirates, and the Marines and world government were dealt with. Neither side should be daring enough to provoke him now. But speculation wouldn't solve anything. Noir turned to Wiper, a fierce glint in his eyes. "Take him to get treated. Then, tell the crew to prepare for battle. I'll go have a look." Wiper nodded. Golden light enveloped Noir, and he shot into the sky, disappearing in an instant. On the coastline of the island, 3 expensive-looking ships were anchored. A group of men in black stood on the shore. Bang! A massive sound echoed as one of the scouts was flung through the air by a hulking giant of a man, who was wielding a massive pillar-like club. With a single swing, he sent several others flying, the ground trembling under the impact. The giant sneered, grabbing a young man by the head. "Did that new warlord, Noir, send you weaklings to die?" The young man's skull creaked under the pressure, blood streaming down his face, but his eyes remained defiant. "S like you isn't worthy of speaking our savior name," he snarled. The giant merely scoffed. A brat who hasn't even grown his first hair dares to talk back. He raised his club, a cruel smile on his face. "You can die first, and then I'll send Noir to join you." As the unwelcome intruder on the shore raised his massive weapon, about to end the young scout's life, a thunderous roar ripped through the air. Startled, the brute looked up, but before he could identify the source, his vision was engulfed in a blinding golden light. The light exploded against the giant, sending him flying hundreds of meters with a pained howl. As the brilliance faded, Noir materialized, his hands in his pockets, one long leg casually extended as if he'd merely taken a step. He smirked, his voice dripping with arrogance. "What were you saying again?" The young scout, pulled back from the brink of death, looked up at Noir, his voice filled with relief. "Savior. This guy ignored our warnings and trespassed on the island. He attacked our brothers." The scout was covered in grievous wounds, yet he reported with unwavering clarity, a spark of pride igniting within Noir. Noir helped him up, his voice gentle. "I understand. I'll take care of it from here." "Yes, sir. The giant struggled to his feet, his eyes wide with a newfound fear as he stared at Noir. He muttered under his breath, "That power, that speed, it's not something a kid should have." Noir's smile turned cold, and his imposing figure vanished once more. The giant's heart leapt into his throat. He tried to turn, to counter, but another blindingly fast kick slammed into him, sending him sprawling again. He was nothing but brute force, a dime a dozen thug. Noir could cut down 100 of him without breaking a sweat. Where did this nobody get the nerve to fight him? Realizing he was outmatched, the giant bellowed to his men, "Don't just stand there, attack." The black-clad, masked figures surged forward, brandishing their weapons and encircling Noir. Noir didn't even bother to react, he simply snapped his fingers in the air. The shadows beneath his feet stirred, slithering across the ground with uncanny speed, connecting with the shadows of his attackers. The once aggressive mob froze, rooted to the spot as if paralyzed. Noir drew Devil Blade, leisurely dragging the cursed blade towards the terrified giant. Before Noir even reached him, the men behind him collapsed, their shadows severed, their screams filling the air. The giant gulped, staring at Noir's deceptively gentle expression. He didn't dare utter another word of trash talk. The backdrop of his men's agonizing cries and their bodies dissolving into ashes was a stark deterrent. Noir tapped the giant's chin with the hilt of his sword. "Who are you?" The giant's teeth chattered. I'm a pirate." Noir's eyes narrowed. He casually raised his sword, resting the blade on the giant's neck. "Do you think I'm an idiot? If you were a pirate in the New World, you'd know who I am." The New World wasn't the paradise of the Grand Line's first half. It was chaotic, yes, but it had its own order. To thrive in the New World, one needed connections to the four emperors, and any emperor would know of Noir's battles with marine admirals. Even those without ties to the emperors, if they were bold enough to enter the perilous New World, wouldn't be so reckless, unless they had a death wish, or were utter fools. The giant trembled, stammering out a desperate plea. I really don't know. Someone just hired me to cause trouble for you." Noir raised an eyebrow. "Who wants to cause trouble for me?" The giant stammered, "I don't know, it was an anonymous commission." Noir's eyes narrowed. "What's in it for you? Money?" The giant nodded frantically. "I'm a bounty hunter. Someone posted a bounty for your head in the underworld." The underworld? Noir frowned. He knew what that term signified. It wasn't a literal other world, but rather a network for illicit dealings, a vast marketplace for illegal transactions, hence the name, Underworld. When it came to the underworld, Noir's first thought was of another Shichibukai. Don Quixote Doflamingo, whose underworld alias was Joker, was considered the biggest player and broker in that shadowy realm. Since the underworld dealt with more dangerous individuals, it made sense for someone seeking Noir's head to post a bounty there. After all, with Noir's new status as a Shichibukai, the world government had officially stopped targeting him. Killing him openly was now virtually impossible. Noir stroked his chin, deep in thought. Who would want him dead? And who had access to the underworld's network? It had to be someone with considerable power and influence. Could it be Doflamingo? It didn't make sense. Noir had never even met the man, let alone offended him. The only possible connection was that Noir had destroyed some slave trading operations in Sabaody, a few of which were owned by the Don Quixote family. But that seemed like a flimsy motive. Besides, if Doflamingo were involved, he would have handled it more subtly, especially since the underworld was his domain. Noir looked at the giant, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. This guy was clearly a low-level grunt, he knew nothing of value. Perhaps a more direct approach was needed. He should pay Doflamingo a visit in Dressrosa and ask him directly. The giant, seeing Noir lost in thought, cautiously asked, "See, can I go now, Shichibukai-sama?" Noir waved his hand dismissively. Yeah, get out of here." The giant scrambled to his feet, practically tripping over himself in his haste to escape. Just as he leapt onto his ship, about to set sail, the sky suddenly darkened. Like the wrath of a god, countless bolts of lightning rained down, obliterating the ship and everyone on board. Noir watched the ship turn to ashes without a flicker of emotion. "Clean and efficient," he murmured. Bolts of lightning crackled on the ground, coalescing into Enel. He grumbled, "Why'd I have to deal with this trash?" Noir yawned lazily, "Because I'm too lazy to do it myself." Before they could continue their conversation, an air door silently opened behind them. The first person out, however, was flung out. Oh, it was a battered and unconscious Wiper. Noir's expression froze. "Oh, I forgot I snuck out." As if on cue, the air door opened fully, revealing two figures with furious expressions. Robin and Khalifa, their hair disheveled, cracked their knuckles, their voices echoing like vengeful spirits. "Noir, you skipped out on work again. Do you have any idea how much work you left behind?" Noir and Wiper, who had snuck out to play, were eventually and inevitably caught and dragged back. While Noir had the popular support, he knew his limitations when it came to administrative tasks. He was better at setting the overall direction and leaving the details to the experts. After all, even a leader needed to delegate. He couldn't handle every single detail, or he'd work himself to death. Besides Robin, Khalifa had also resumed her old profession, becoming Noir's secretary, just like when she had infiltrated Iceberg's organization in Water 7. On the Sky Island, within the rapidly developing Cloud Palace, Noir and his inner circle were handling official business. Noir struggled to keep his eyes open, the endless stream of doents inducing a powerful drowsiness. Khalifa sat opposite him, her slender figure accentuated by a form-fitting skirt suit and gold-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, a truly captivating sight. Just as Noir's head was about to hit the desk, salvation arrived. 2 knocks sounded on the door. Noir instantly perked up, while Khalifa, frowning slightly, went to answer it. His aged face peered in, his voice filled with excitement. "Your Highness, Curry has completed the air door."
Noir's eyes lit up. He shoved the table aside and jumped to his feet, roaring with laughter. "Let's go take a look."
Khalifa sighed helplessly and adjusted her glasses. There was still a lot to do today, but she decided to let him have his way for now. The 3 of them flew down from the Sky Island and made their way to the ruins of the former royal palace. Curry and her research team had converted the area into a makeshift lab, intending to use it as the access point to the Sky Island. As soon as Noir entered the old palace, a petite figure hurtled towards him, latching onto his head. Curry hugged Noir's head tightly, her voice filled with childish glee. Your Highness, I did it." Noir, struggling to pry the little girl off, said exasperatedly, "You nearly suffocated me." "Where's this air door?" Curry led Noir and the others deeper into the palace, where a massive, ornate gate stood before them. The frame was made of white gem, inlaid with gold, diamonds, and other precious gems. It was a truly imposing sight. The gate's interior, however, was a swirling, opaque white void. It was impossible to see what lay beyond, or where it might lead. Curry proudly patted the jade frame. "I studied Uncle Bluno's powers, extended and stabilized the devil fruit's wavelength, and created a continuously operational teleportation gate."
Noir scratched his head, slightly bewildered. "I don't really get it, but it works, right?" Curry nodded vigorously. She stepped into the swirling white void without hesitation. Noir quickly followed. After a brief moment of dizziness, Noir opened his eyes to find himself standing before a gate on the Sky Island.
He marveled, impressive, to finish it so quickly. Curry puffed out her chest, her nose practically touching the sky. "Of course.
It's just that we were pressed for time. The maximum range is probably limited to a single island, and it requires a lot of complicated setup on both ends."
Noir nodded in understanding. He'd already considered that. If it were so easy to install portals all over the world, he could conquer entire nations without breaking a sweat. It was a work in progress, but he was patient. He turned his attention to another project he'd assigned to Curry. He ruffled Curry's hair and asked, "What about the armor designs I gave you? Have you made any progress?" Curry's expression turned downcast. "I understand some of it, but the rest is completely beyond me. I need more time." In other words, she hadn't succeeded yet. Noir stroked his chin thoughtfully. Even with Curry's talent, her isolated upbringing in Noidam had limited her knowledge and experience. It would be great if she had a mentor, a scientific veteran to guide her. If only he knew where to find him, Noir would have kidnapped Vegapunk by now.
And within Noidam itself, even the most brilliant Curry had received a limited education. What about the general populace? He needed to establish proper educational institutions to guide talent for the kingdom.
There's so much this kingdom lacks. Noir rubbed his temples, a slight headache forming. If only he had an ally who could provide technical and personnel support, Noidam's development could be greatly accelerated. A thought struck him. He had been planning to visit Doflamingo anyway. Doflamingo's Dressrosa, or rather, the former King Riku's Dressrosa, had stood strong in the perilous New World for years. They must have had their strengths. Currently, Dressrosa was no less powerful than many of the world's great powers. Perhaps he could visit Doflamingo to inquire about the underworld incident and discuss matters of state while he was at it. Noir reassured Curry and casually offered a few suggestions before sending her off. Then he turned to Khalifa. "How far are we from Dressrosa?" Khalifa produced a large sea chart from seemingly nowhere and pointed to a location. "Not close, but with a fast ship, we could probably reach it in 2 or 3 days." 2 or 3 days was nothing for a pirate accustomed to life at sea. Noir grinned and patted her shoulder. "Make the arrangements. I want to pay them a visit." Khalifa tilted her head, a questioning look in her eyes. "Dressrosa is Doflamingo's territory. What do you intend to do there?" Noir chuckled. "Investigate the underworld business, of course, and see what benefits his kingdom can offer us." Khalifa seemed to understand. "You want to establish trade or some form of cooperation with Dressrosa to help Noidam through its initial development?" Noir snapped his fingers, pointing at her with a smile. "Exactly, we're just starting out. Having allies wouldn't hurt." Khalifa stared at Noir for a moment, then said thoughtfully, "If you're looking for allies, there are better options. Like the people you've befriended, Boa Hancock, the Empress of Amazon Lily, or Jinbei, the Knight of the Sea of Fishman Island. Or, with a bit more effort, you could seek help from the Mayor of Water 7 in Paradise." Khalifa counted them off on her fingers. Noir was surprised to realize that he actually had quite a few friends besides his enemies.
Although Khalifa's suggestions were sound, Noir decided to personally visit Doflamingo.
He could easily send a letter to form an alliance with Boa Hancock or Jinbei, given their existing friendship. Doflamingo, however, was a different story. Besides, Noir still wasn't sure if Doflamingo was the one who had put a hit on him. Since his head was now a target in the underworld, Noir wanted to resolve the issue quickly. Early the next morning, a newly built warship was docked at Noitam Island's coast. A group of people gathered to see Noir off. For this trip, he was only taking Lucci and Bluno. With their leader gone, Noir needed reliable people to remain on the island. Isho was more than enough to handle any high-level threats. Robin and Khalifa were essential for managing the kingdom's affairs. Wiper and Enel could serve as manpower. Lucci was perceptive, and Bluno possessed the Doa Doa no Mi, a perfect escape ability. Taking those two along was sufficient. With everyone waving them off, Noir, Lucci, and Bluno departed from Noitam Island. Enel stood on the shore, grumbling, "Why can't I go? It's so boring here." Wiper, his expression impassive, scoffed, "You'd just be a nuisance." Robin sighed, shaking her head with a wry smile. "The kingdom is barely established, and the king runs off. He really can't sit still." Meanwhile, far away on the island of Dressrosa, a tropical paradise filled with the fragrance of flowers and renowned for its delectable cuisine. Beyond its beauty, the island held legends of fairies, whom the locals revered as guardian deities. For reasons unknown, the citizens coexisted with living toys, which were integrated into their daily lives. And the one currently ruling over this unique kingdom was none other than one of the 7 warlords of the sea, Don Quixote Doflamingo. Doflamingo, adored and respected by his people, sat on his throne, legs crossed, reading a letter. As he finished, a low chuckle escaped his lips. "Noir is coming to see me?" In the vast, empty palace, a slovenly man draped in a slimy, mucus-like cloak and wielding a spade-shaped staff emerged from the shadows. This was Trebol, one of Doflamingo's most trusted subordinates. He sniffled, his voice nasally and unpleasant. "Why would that little punk, who just became a warlord, want to meet you, Doffy?" Doflamingo let out his signature, unsettling laugh. "Fufufufu, I think I know why." About half a month ago, just as the newly appointed warlord Noir returned to Noitam to establish his kingdom, a bounty for his head suddenly appeared in the underworld. As the underworld's kingpin, Doflamingo was well aware of this development. The person who posted the bounty was exceptionally careful, leaving no trace, not even for him. The bounty for Noir's head in the underworld far exceeded the Marine's bounty, making it extremely attractive to bounty hunters. But as the most powerful warlord, even without concrete evidence, Doflamingo could make an educated guess about the instigator's identity. Doflamingo stood up, his lanky frame unfolding as he adopted his signature strut. "Come, Trebol. Let's go greet our new warlord colleague." Trebol snorted, snot dripping from his nose. "Is that little upstart worth such treatment?" Doflamingo chuckled coldly. "If you bothered to learn more about Noir, you'd know he's a dangerous man." With his extensive network of contacts and informants, Doflamingo was one of the few outsiders who knew about Noir's rampage in Mary Joieuse and the liberation of the slaves. He will never underestimated Noir's abilities. Moreover, Noir hadn't stated the purpose of his visit in the letter. Doflamingo needed to meet him in person, if he came with hostile intent. Doflamingo pushed open the palace doors. The wind whipped his pink feather coat as he suddenly launched himself into the air. With several more mid-air leaps, he effortlessly traversed the distance to Dressrosa's coast, the wind howling around him. In the distance, Noir's warship was slowly approaching. Standing at the bow, Noir squinted at the figure on the shore. "Is that Doflamingo?" "He came to greet me personally." Noir stood proudly at the bow, radiating an aura of, "Everyone owes me respect," much like a certain red-haired pirate. Doflamingo's intentions were different. He simply preferred to have any potential battles take place outside his kingdom. Noir focused on Doflamingo, activating his system's observation ability to analyze his talents. Name: Don Quixote Doflamingo, King of Chaos. Gold quality, born with a king's disposition. All 3 types of haki will fully awaken and strengthen upon reaching adulthood. Possesses enhanced charisma and greater control over subordinates. Destined for a major physical and mental ordeal. Overcoming the ordeal with a righteous heart awakens extreme good, granting a 300% boost to stamina, willpower, and intelligence when pushed to the brink. Overcoming the ordeal with a heart consumed by darkness awakens extreme evil, guaranteeing the awakening of the devil fruit ability before the age of 30, with maximum development potential and power. However, if the individual overcomes the ordeal by breaking through their inner barriers and redefining good and evil, they will gain the benefits of both extreme good and extreme evil. Devil's Host. Ito Ito. Gold quality, has consumed the Paramecia type Ito Ito no Mi, becoming host to a devil's power, granting the ability to freely manipulate strings. Seed of Evil. Red quality, when engaging in or managing any black market activity, charisma increases infinitely with the scale of the operation. Others will naturally gravitate towards and trust them more readily. Scorned by the Sea. Purple quality, having gained the power of a devil, they are also cursed by it. The curse is detested by the sea, causing weakness and inability to use their abilities when in contact with seawater. Noir stared at Doflamingo's talents, particularly the lengthy gold one. Extreme good and extreme evil. Noir remembered from his past life, when he followed the manga, that he'd always considered Doflamingo to be exceptionally wicked. But after learning about Doflamingo's childhood, Noir understood the meaning behind this talent. After experiencing such trauma, no one could remain untouched by darkness. Only those who stand at the pinnacle can define good and evil. This was the principle that Doflamingo had grasped and followed throughout his life. Noir generally avoided copying talents that required an ordeal to unlock their benefits. Judging from Doflamingo's and others' experiences, even if he had protagonist-level luck, he'd likely suffer greatly. Noir instructed the system, copy the string fruits ability, replace Conqueror's swordsmanship. The talent he copied from Shanks. Even though his mastery of the string fruit wouldn't match Doflamingo's, a fully awakened devil fruit ability was better than nothing. Moreover, his swordsmanship had reached a plateau. With a black gold talent already in his possession, the gold quality Conqueror's swordsmanship was no longer providing significant benefits. As their ship slowly docked, Noir led Lucci and Bluno down the gangplank, heading towards Doflamingo. Doflamingo stood with his hands in his pockets, observing Noir through his crimson sunglasses. He was undeniably striking, a man who lived up to the moniker, Devil. At close range, Doflamingo could clearly sense the haki emanating from Noir, completely restrained, yet brimming with power. He was indeed the youngest of the 7 warlords, and far more formidable than the has-been Moria. Doflamingo greeted him as Noir approached. "Noir, what brings you here so soon after becoming a warlord?" Noir smiled. "I've established a kingdom. You've heard, I presume?" Doflamingo tilted his head, feigning contemplation. "Word does get around." Noir continued, "I'm here to see if your kingdom has anything I can learn from." Doflamingo nodded, seemingly understanding. "In that case, allow me to be your guide." It was a reasonable excuse. As a fellow warlord, Doflamingo had no grounds to refuse. However, he feared Noir might uncover the kingdom's secrets, and his subordinates were no match for him. Thus, he decided to personally escort the young pirate. Noir didn't decline. "Sure." Doflamingo frowned slightly, then turned and led the 3 into the heart of Dressrosa. As they walked through the town, they were surrounded by the sights and sounds of delicious food and lively music. Scantily clad young women danced sensually in the streets. This was one of Dressrosa's selling points. To Noir, their style of dance resembled the flamenco of his past life. Doflamingo, his voice laced with a hint of wickedness, explained, "Dressrosa is known as the island of love and passion. Beauty and an excessive obsession with love are never in short supply. But these women are also incredibly jealous. Betrayal leads to a fury of attacks. So, men who come here seeking thrills should also be mindful of their safety." Noir's lips twitched. Why was Doflamingo telling him this? Did he think he was here for pleasure? And you know what? He probably did. Doflamingo couldn't fathom why Noir would go to such lengths to rebuild a kingdom, then use such a flimsy excuse to visit Dressrosa. As a pirate, and a warlord at that, he could easily take over a prosperous kingdom with a few underhanded tricks. Why bother with the hard work? Thus, in Doflamingo's mind, Noir was not only strong and unconventional but also lecherous. Noir's eyes lit up as he observed the scantily clad dancers in the streets. Lucci and Bluno looked away, slightly embarrassed. This further confirmed Doflamingo's suspicions. Seizing the opportunity, he said, "I hear you were attacked recently?" Noir knew he was being tested. He answered candidly, "Yes, and that's another reason I'm here." Doflamingo let out a sigh of relief, then chuckled. "Do you think I'm responsible?" Noir didn't deny it. "Of course. Your influence in the underworld makes you a prime suspect." Doflamingo adjusted his glasses, his hand in his pocket clenching slightly. His voice was low. "So, you're here for revenge?" As a natural-born king, Doflamingo wouldn't stoop to explaining himself, even to another warlord. Noir sensed Doflamingo's readiness to fight. He said calmly, "Don't be so tense, I just need your help with something." Doflamingo scoffed. "And why would I help you?" Noir smiled. I want you to use your network to find out who put a hit on me. Doflamingo leaned forward, his tall frame resembling a predatory flamingo. And what's in it for me? Noir shrugged. I'll pay for the information, of course. Doflamingo shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. I don't need your petty cash. Noir's tone hardened slightly. Then what do you want? Doflamingo stared intently at Noir for a long moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. Don't be so uptight, Noir. I'll help you investigate. Consider it a friendly gesture between new acquaintances, alright? Noir nodded without hesitation. Deal. He knew Doflamingo was trying to form an alliance, so there was no need to escalate the situation. While the man's thoughts and methods were dangerous, making Noir uncomfortable, there was no need to create unnecessary enemies. He couldn't do anything about Doflamingo's actions in Dressrosa or his overthrow of King Riku. If not for his connection to Noidum, Noir would probably have taken over a powerful kingdom himself, just like Doflamingo and Crocodile. Doflamingo led Noir to a corner cafe and sat down on a lounge chair. Actually, I've already looked into it for you, even before you arrived. Noir raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And, who is it? Doflamingo, basking in the admiring gazes of passers-by, leaned back in his chair.
The bounty on you in the underworld has been there for a while. It just recently increased significantly, becoming more noticeable, which is probably how you found out about it.
Noir was taken aback. You mean someone has wanted me dead even before my conflict with the Marines and the world government? Doflamingo nodded, a cryptic smile on his face. Think about the people you angered when you were just a rookie in the Grand Line. Who might that be? Noir's expression suddenly turned awkward. Could it be that guy? Someone powerful enough to put a hit on him in the underworld, and someone he fought early on, it seemed to fit. Was that guy really so petty? Noir mused aloud. Is Crocodile really that petty? Doflamingo, lounging comfortably in his chair, replied, probably. The first bounty on you appeared around the time you left Alabasta. Noir felt a sense of relief. Now that he knew his opponent, the threat seemed less daunting. Initially, he'd suspected another plot by the Marines or the world government, and he'd been ready to retaliate. But if it was just Crocodile, the solution was simple. He could always make a return trip to Alabasta and deal with Crocodile and his Baroque works. Or, if he felt particularly ambitious, he could even recruit Crocodile to his crew. Crocodile's power fluctuated wildly. In the desert, he was nearly invincible, and even at his worst, he could still manage a stalemate and escape. But at sea, his strength was significantly diminished. Noir was confident he could handle him anytime. Things were different now. His growth far surpassed anything Crocodile could imagine. Seeing Noir's composure, Doflamingo couldn't help but chuckle. You seem confident you can handle Crocodile.
Don't forget, he's a warlord, just like us. Noir clenched his fist, a cold smile playing on his lips. There are levels to being a warlord. Do you honestly think you'd lose to Crocodile?
Doflamingo simply smirked, not bothering to answer. If they were to fight seriously, outside of a desert environment, he was confident he would win. Noir sat down beside Doflamingo and grabbed a glass of juice. Now then, let's talk about cooperation between our kingdoms. Doflamingo looked at him, surprised. You're serious about rebuilding that kingdom? Noir gave him a strange look. Of course, isn't that why I came here? Doflamingo shook his head, a sigh escaping his lips. I don't understand you, fine, Trebol.
At his call, the mucus-covered man emerged from a nearby alley and hurried over.
Trebol, snot dripping, stood beside Doflamingo, casting a wary glance at Noir. Ignoring his gaze, Noir listened as Doflamingo gave his orders. Noir's kingdom wants to establish trade relations with Dressrosa. See to the arrangements. Trebol nodded quickly. Noir watched, a flicker of envy in his eyes. With a few simple words, Doflamingo had delegated this tedious task to his subordinate. The ultimate form of hands-off management, Doflamingo leaned back, his arms behind his head, his voice casual. Say, Noir, are you interested in a little business venture? It could be quite beneficial for your kingdom. Noir asked, what kind of business? Doflamingo grinned, a sinister glint in his eyes. The kind they deal in the underworld. Noir frowned and immediately refused. No thanks. What kind of business was done in the underworld? Arms dealing, smuggling, mercenary work, and the one thing Noir swore never to touch, human trafficking. It wasn't that Noir was too virtuous to consider those lucrative ventures. In the world of pirates, might made right, but the core population of Noidum was unique. Besides the slaves he'd rescued from Mary Joieuse, there were also the war-weary remnants of Noidum. They had all been victims of the underworld's illicit activities. To engage in those activities for profit would be to betray their trust. Noir wasn't that foolish. Besides, Noidum wasn't lacking in funds, but rather in technology and knowledge. Doflamingo seemed to have anticipated Noir's refusal and said nothing further. He knew about Noidum's situation. He thought Noir might be tempted by quick riches, but it seemed the young pirate wasn't so easily swayed. But if Noir refused to get involved in such matters, it meant they could still become enemies in the future. Hopefully, that fool Crocodile could cause Noir some trouble. That would give Doflamingo an opportunity to capitalize. As the two sat in an awkward silence, Trable suddenly returned, whispering something into Doflamingo's ear. Noir watched them, his senses on alert. Just then, his Den Den Mushi rang. It was the one he used to communicate with Robin. He quickly answered, and the snail morphed into Robin's likeness, her voice urgent. Is it safe to talk? Noir glanced around. Doflamingo and Trable had moved away. It's fine. What is it? Noitum has been attacked. Noir frowned. Was anyone hurt? Did you catch them?
Robin sounded frustrated. No, they got away. Noir was surprised. This warranted his attention. Did Isho and Enel not intervene?
Robin explained, they did, but the attackers were numerous and several escaped. Noir's expression darkened. Who are they? Did you identify them? Robin sighed. We've never seen them before, but their fighting style was strange. Some of them were incredibly resilient, and they all wore matching combat suits of different colors. They managed to keep Enel occupied. And their soldiers, they were like mindless machines, always jumping in to take hits for them. This description, could it be Germa 66? The infamous Germa was a mercenary force led by Vinsmoke Judge, Sanji's father. Moreover, Germa 66 was a notorious family of assassins in the underworld. Could it be that Crocodile's bounty had attracted this criminal organization? On the other side, Trable was reporting the same news to Doflamingo. Doflamingo looked at Trable in surprise. Germa 66 mobilized their entire force just to destroy that fledgling kingdom? Trable nodded. That's what the underworld sources say. Doflamingo's interest was piqued. Interesting. Crocodile must have offered them a hefty sum. They're still but they're far more capable than those other hired thugs. I wonder how Noir will handle this. For Noir, Noitum was his home base. Although they had repelled Germa's initial attack, for safety's sake, he needed to return and assess the situation. Noir stood up abruptly and spoke into the Den Den Mushi. Prepare for another possible attack. I'm on my way back. Doflamingo's sinister smile widened with a hint of surprise. Leaving so soon? What's the rush? Noir nodded, his voice serious. I have some urgent matters to attend to back home. Germa 66 was well known in the underworld. Doflamingo had likely called Trable out to discuss them.
Dealing with the underworld was always a messy affair. Germa 66 wasn't a major threat to Noir himself, but they could pose a significant challenge to his crew. He needed to act swiftly. Once he dealt with Germa 66, he'd make a return trip to take care of Crocodile.
Doflamingo watched him, a knowing glint in his eyes. Need any help? I do have some influence in the underworld. Noir stared at him for a moment, then smiled. No thanks, I can handle it. Doflamingo was a shrewd and calculating man. Noir couldn't afford to get entangled in his personal affairs, or he might end up being manipulated without even realizing it. Seeing Noir's refusal, Doflamingo shrugged, suit yourself. Noir and his companions left as quickly as they had arrived, soon setting sail on their return journey. Doflamingo stood on the shore, watching their ship shrink in the distance. He chuckled softly, an interesting man. Don't you think so, Violet? At his words, a graceful woman with long, dark hair, dressed in a polka-dotted flamenco dress, emerged from a shadowed corner behind him. Violet gazed at Doflamingo's back. Why did you let him go? Doflamingo shook his head, turning to face the woman's impassive expression. He smiled. Crocodile has been getting restless. It wouldn't hurt to let Noir deal with him. Violet asked, and Germa 66? You leaked information to them, didn't you? You're the reason they're targeting Noir. Doflamingo approached Violet, lifting her chin with his hand, his voice a menacing whisper. Violet, women shouldn't be too clever. It can be hazardous to their health. Violet wrenched her chin from his grasp and turned away, walking off in silence. Doflamingo watched her go, a sinister grin spreading across his face. The up-and-coming warlord Noir, the troublesome Crocodile, and the arrogant, self-important Germa. Which of these three forces would prevail? Noir, already far away, was completely unaware of Doflamingo's machinations. Even if he had known, he probably would have scoffed. Neither Germa nor Crocodile were significant threats to him, even combined. Sitting on the deck of his returning ship, Noir thoughtfully considered the Germa attack. While Germa's soldiers were generally unimpressive, their scientific technology was undeniably intriguing. Cloning based on lineage factors, modified soldiers, mass-produced combat suits, and various unique weapons. Coincidentally, these were all things Noir desired. Initially, he'd hoped to study the pacifistas created by Bartholomew Kuma, but when that failed, he'd set his sights on Germa's army. But he'd never encountered Judge and his forces on his journey. He'd almost given up, and now they had delivered themselves to his doorstep. Studying their combat suits could aid in the development of his Iron Man suits, and Judge, as Vegapunk's former colleague, could mentor the brilliant Curry, it was a win-win. He would have to capture both Germa's technology and their personnel on this return trip. The ship raced towards Neutem at full throttle. They arrived under the cover of night, but as they approached the island, they were met with a shocking sight. The already disorderly coastline was now even more ravaged, scarred by fresh blood and the marks of explosions, clear evidence of a recent battle. Lucci, his expression grim, leapt onto the shore first, examining the area around the landing site. Noir joined him. Looks like the crew had a rough fight with Germa. Lucci nodded. Besides the blast craters, there are a lot of scorch marks from lightning strikes. After a brief survey, Noir had Blue Note teleport them towards the capital. The air door opened, and they stepped into the city. To their relief, Enel appeared to be in the same state as when they had left, bustling with life and reconstruction. "Captain, you're back." They turned to see Enel, crackling with blue electricity, grinning widely. Seeing his carefree attitude, Noir feigned seriousness. "Judging by your cheerful demeanor, I assume you played a significant role in repelling the invaders?" Enel, despite his thick skin, actually seemed embarrassed. "Well, they were numerous, and a bit slippery. Some got away." Noir was amused. Enel possessed the Guro Guro no Mi, a logia devil fruit with incredible destructive power and speed, second only to Kizaru's Pika Pika no Mi. How could he have let Germa's modified humans escape? Seeing Noir's silent scrutiny, Enel finally lowered his head, sheepishly admitting, "Okay, fine. Maybe I was a little careless." Noir sighed, covering his face with his hand. "Alright, I won't dwell on it this time. But listen up. In a fight, any arrogance or complacency can be your downfall." Enel nodded quickly, like a child trying to appease an angry parent, but inwardly, he didn't take it seriously. His powers were widely recognized as formidable. As long as he didn't encounter an admiral-level opponent, he was confident he could handle anything, even with a bit of carelessness. Noir knew his words hadn't sunk in, but he shook his head helplessly. Enel's only real weakness was his own overconfidence. Hopefully, it wouldn't lead to disaster. In the Blue Sea, it was indeed difficult for anyone to truly harm Enel. Changing the subject, Noir asked, "What are our losses?" Enel thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Not much. They never even made it into the capital. We intercepted them before they got far. Many of our people suffered minor injuries, but no one was killed." That was a relief. While there were casualties, the outcome wasn't unexpected. Though Germa's soldiers were well trained, disciplined, and strong, Neutem had a significant advantage in high-level fighters. If not for the fact that they were within Neutem's territory, Isho could have simply dropped a meteor and wiped out a large portion of the attackers. Judge and his ilk wouldn't have stood a chance. Meanwhile, Germa 66, having fled their attack on Neutem, regrouped to prepare for another assault. They were gathered on their fleet of ships, some distance from Neutem. The Germa kingdom, ruled by the Vinsmoke family, was unique in the world, a seafaring nation without a fixed territory. Their forces typically operated in separate fleets, but when combined, their ships formed a mobile kingdom. Within the most opulent castle among the assembled ships, the rulers of Germa resided. In a spacious hall with a grayish-white base, a man wearing a helmet and golden armor sat regally on a throne at the far end of the room, his expression stern. Below the throne, several young men and women, bearing a striking resemblance to each other and dressed in similar attire, knelt respectfully. The ruler of Germa, Vinsmoke Judge, slammed his fist on the table, his voice filled with anger. Even without Noir present, his subordinates are formidable opponents.
Vinsmoke Ichiji, the eldest son, with his red hair and curled eyebrows, stated impassively, "If you hadn't ordered a retreat, father, the outcome might have been different."
Niji, the second son, nodded in agreement, his voice equally devoid of fear. "We will complete the mission." The youngest son, Yanji, with his vibrant green hair, laughed arrogantly. That lightning guy was nothing but a weakling. Judge frowned, listening to his children's chatter. Though he had modified their genes using lineage factor in their childhood, granting them superhuman physiques, he had also inadvertently stripped them of most human emotions. They were now practically living weapons, their eyes fixed solely on the mission, devoid of any fear of death. Hearing her brother's voices, Reiju, who had been standing silently with her head bowed, clenched her jaw. As one of the only two of Judge's children to retain their emotions, Reiju felt a deep sadness whenever she witnessed Ichiji and the others' callous behavior. But she was powerless to resist. Their fates were firmly in their father's grasp. Judge ignored his son's words, his grip tightening on his weapon, his heart pounding with anxiety. The information he'd received from the underworld suggested that the newly appointed warlord, Noir, was merely an overhyped figurehead, but during their initial attack on Noir's stronghold, the man himself hadn't even shown his face, yet Germa's forces had nearly been wiped out by his subordinates. A logia user with the power of lightning, an ancient zone with the ability to transform into a giant flying reptile, and a blind swordsman whose abilities bordered on natural disasters. The memory sent shivers down Judge's spine. If they hadn't been toying with them, Judge and his children wouldn't have made it back alive. Seeing Judge's somber expression, Reiju finally spoke up, her voice filled with concern. "Father, perhaps we should abandon this mission. Assassinating a warlord was a task few in the underworld want to accept. Warlords typically commanded vast resources and possessed formidable personal strength. Judge had been blinded by his ambition, underestimating Noir's power due to his recent appointment, and had taken on a mission far beyond their capabilities. The truth was, even a new warlord was not someone Germa 66 could easily handle. Reiju's suggestion to retreat, however, was met with scorn from her brothers. Yanji, in particular, shook his seaweed-like hair and scoffed. "Why should we retreat? He's just a warlord. One more attack, and we'll definitely win." His brothers echoed his sentiment, their voices rising in a chorus of agreement, filling the hall with their clamor. Judge rubbed his temples, a headache forming. After a moment of deliberation, he decided to retreat, at least for now. If Noir's subordinates alone could rout his forces, what about the man himself? It was best to escape while Noir was still absent. If they waited until he returned, their chances would be even slimmer. Judge clapped his hands, silencing his sons. He spoke with forced authority. "The mission difficulty is too high. We..." Boom, boom, boom. Before he could finish, a series of explosions rocked the fleet, the deafening roar nearly bursting their eardrums. "What's going on out there?" Judge shouted, covering his ears, his voice filled with a mix of anger and fear. A soldier burst through the door, pointing outside with a trembling hand. Someone's attacking from the sky." "What?" Judge rushed outside, his children following close behind. As soon as he stepped out, Judge was nearly paralyzed by the terrifying spectacle in the sky. A giant, glowing golden sun hung in the clear blue sky, unleashing a barrage of meteor-like projectiles onto the sea and the ships below. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a beautiful display of power, but to Judge, it was a vision of horror. Each of those streaks of light was a devastating laser, capable of triggering massive explosions on impact. From within the golden sun, a figure slowly emerged, gradually taking the form of Noir. Noir hovered in the air, a cold smile on his face as he surveyed the ant-like figures of the Vinsmoke family below. The laser barrage continued unabated. This was a modified version of Kizaru's Yasukani no Magatama, with a wider attack range but, understandably, less accuracy. Judge, recognizing Noir, was filled with a mixture of rage and terror. "What are you doing?" he bellowed. Noir scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Destroying your kingdom, of course."
Judge's heart pounded in his chest. He finally overcame his fear and charged towards Noir, screaming, "You bastard! Stop this!"
Seeing their father take the lead, his three sons, as if receiving a silent command, rushed after him. Only Reiju hesitated, standing frozen on the deck, unsure of what to do. She realized the utter foolishness of their actions. Germa 66 might be powerful in the North Blue, but they were out of their depth here. As Reiju had anticipated, even though Judge and his sons charged into the air with fierce determination, Noir remained unfazed. He casually raised his leg, now enveloped in a blinding golden light. Reiju watched as a flash of gold streaked across her vision. Her father and brothers, who had just launched themselves into the air, were instantly kicked back down, crashing through the decks of their ships and plunging into the sea. After effortlessly dispatching the Vinsmoke father and sons who had so foolishly rushed him, Noir descended from the sky. He landed before a stunned Reiju, and with a slightly wicked grin, placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Reiju, was it? Gather your people. You're coming with me." Reiju, startled by Noir's forceful grip, trembled slightly. "As you command," she whispered. Noir raised an eyebrow. Her words made him sound like some kind of villain abducting innocent women. Under Noir's watchful eye, Reiju led the Germa soldiers in cleaning up the battlefield, which included fishing Judge and his sons out of the water. Though they had only taken one hit each from Noir, the Vinsmokes had suffered multiple broken bones and were barely clinging to consciousness. After checking on them, Reiju felt a renewed sense of awe and fear towards Noir. She was grateful she hadn't been foolish enough to join their suicidal charge. The infamous Germa 66, a family of assassins feared even in the underworld, had been single-handedly and casually defeated by Noir. After all, if even the strongest of Germa couldn't defeat Sanji 2 years later, how could they have hoped to stand against Noir? Once the cleanup was complete, Noir, acting as a one-man escort, led the entire Germa kingdom and their fleet back towards Noidum. Less than a day after Noir's departure, the citizens of Noidum were astonished to see their leader returning. He was leading an entire fleet, a clear and overwhelming victory evident in his stride. The people cheered, lining the streets to welcome Noir back. During Germa's attack, they had fought with a fierce determination, fueled by a desperate need to protect their newfound home. They were all lost souls who had finally found a place to belong. They wouldn't allow anyone to take it from them again. Amidst the joyous celebrations, Noir led the Vinsmoke family through the portal and onto the Sky Island, to the newly constructed Cloud Palace. Noir sat on the newly built throne, a playful smile on his face as he rested his chin on his hand. Before the throne, Judge and his children knelt, their hands and feet bound. Isho and Enel stood guard on either side. Judge, having just regained consciousness, weakly lifted his head, his gaze unfocused as he looked at the man on the throne. "What do you want?" he croaked. Beside Noir, Khalifa, acting as his secretary, answered for him. "You will serve us. You will become researchers for the kingdom of Noidum." Reiju, her head bowed, felt a flicker of surprise. A warlord wanted to recruit them? Judge was taken aback. He considered refusing, but a moment later, he felt a spark of hope. Although he was the ruler of the Germa kingdom, Judge didn't hold much pretense. His ambition was simple. The Vinsmokes were once rulers of a renowned kingdom of science and military might. At their peak, they had even ruled the entire North Blue. Judge's dream was to use his research to restore the Vinsmoke name to its former glory and once again conquer the North Blue. To achieve this dream, even if it meant relying on others, Judge was willing to compromise as long as the Vinsmoke name endured. But if they joined Noidum, would the Vinsmoke name survive? Could he still realize his ambitions for his family? Noir, somewhat aware of Judge's aspirations, decided to offer more lenient terms. After joining Noidum, Germa's forces will be integrated into mine. But your Vinsmoke family can exist as a noble house within my kingdom. Judge's eyes narrowed. Noir's offer was surprisingly generous. Honestly, he didn't care about the soldiers of the Germa army. As long as the core Vinsmoke family remained intact, disbanding the army was irrelevant. To him, those soldiers were merely tools to achieve his goals. To gain the protection of a powerful warlord and retain his family's status, Judge's resolve began to waver. He looked at Noir, the animosity in his eyes replaced by careful consideration. "Lord Noir," he began, "what is your ambition? Is it only the position of a warlord in a kingdom in the New World?"
Seeing his serious expression, everyone present understood that Judge was willing to yield. They all turned their attention to Noir.
Noir didn't hesitate. He smiled confidently. "Of course not. The warlord title is just the beginning. And the kingdom of Noidum will not be confined to a mere corner of this world. A warlord, one of the three great powers of the Grand Line, was just a stepping stone? Then what was this man's ultimate goal? To become one of the 4 emperors? Or perhaps, the Pirate King?" Judge's heart pounded. He steadied his emotions and bowed his head. "I only wish to return to the North Blue in glory." Under his children's watchful gazes, Judge lowered his proud head. "I am willing to join the kingdom of Noidum and serve as your loyal subject." Seeing their family's leader submit, the emotionless Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji, though outwardly indifferent, couldn't disobey their father's decision and followed suit. Reiju breathed a silent sigh of relief. Being the rational one, she was grateful that her father had made the right choice. Refusing Noir's offer, considering their crimes, would have been a death sentence. Moreover, for a normal woman like her, living in the peaceful kingdom of Noidum was far better than being part of an army of evil. Seeing the Vinsmoke submission, Noir clapped his hands, a satisfied smile on his face. "Excellent. You made the right choice. However, your attack on Noidum must still be addressed." Judge's expression remained calm. "Of course, I accept my punishment." Noir rubbed his head, thinking for a moment. "All right, for now, you will personally participate in the reconstruction labor. And during this time, you must earn the forgiveness of the people." Noidum hadn't suffered significant losses, so the punishment didn't need to be severe. Though not cruel, this punishment was a considerable humiliation for the proud Vinsmoke family. Noir also wanted to use this opportunity to break the arrogance and self-importance of Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji. Judge and Reiju accepted the punishment without complaint. The 3 brothers, however, showed visible signs of displeasure. Noir had anticipated this reaction. It was a perfect opportunity to have some fun. These hot-headed, battle-crazed individuals were best suited to be disciplined by someone like Enel. Although the Germa kingdom was a mobile seafaring nation and had a smaller population than a typical land-based kingdom, it was still a significant number of people. Integrating so many individuals at once presented a challenge for Noir. The Germa soldiers, having been trained as soldiers their entire lives, were practically living weapons, blindly loyal to the Vinsmokes. They were incapable of leading normal lives, and their deep-seated loyalty to Judge could lead to complications. For the time being, Noir dispersed them throughout Noidum Island, assigning them to various construction projects away from the capital. This would keep them occupied while also contributing to the kingdom's development. The core members of Germa 66, however, were kept in the capital under close watch. Judge and Reiju followed Noir's orders, diligently apologizing to the citizens of Enel. The people, having suffered no real losses and seeing that the Vinsmokes were now under their king's control, readily forgave them. They saw no reason to hold a grudge, especially since Judge could now be a valuable asset to the kingdom. The same couldn't be said for Ichiji, Niji, and Yanji. The three brothers were a different story. From the start, they had only gone through the motions of apologizing, being disrespectful to the citizens and even attempting to use violence. Fortunately, Noir had anticipated this. Enel, who was assigned to monitor them, quickly intervened. Currently, the three brothers were locked away in a dark cell somewhere in the capital. No one had seen them for days. Occasionally, passers-by could hear blood-curdling screams emanating from the depths of their confinement. Neither Judge nor Reiju intervened in Enel's disciplinary actions. Reiju had no sympathy for her cruel brothers, and Judge was powerless to stop it. After his defeat, Judge had begun to realize that stripping his sons of their emotions might not have been such a wise decision. It seemed to have made them rather unintelligent. With Judge and his children temporarily out of commission, Noir convened a rather informal meeting in the Cloud Palace with his inner circle. The palace, built with considerable resources and effort, was now the official residence of Noir and his top officers. In the grand dining hall, a long table was set for a meal. Noir sat at the head, elegantly carving a piece of steak. Robin, holding a cup of sake, asked curiously, "Why are we discussing official business during a meal?" Noir, chewing on a piece of beef, mumbled, "It sets the right mood." Robin sighed, shaking her head, "But it's hardly regal." Enel, gnawing on a giant crab leg, chimed in, his words muffled, "I think it's great." Nearby, Lucci, his face splattered with food debris from Enel's enthusiastic eating, was on the verge of exploding. He calmly wiped his face and said in a low voice, "If you spray food on me one more time, I will end you." Enel chuckled awkwardly. Robin shook her head, exasperated, and turned to Noir. "So, what did you want to discuss?" Getting back on track, Noir's expression turned serious. He nodded towards Khalifa. Khalifa, ever prepared, produced a stack of doughnuts. The captain wants to recruit talented individuals to form the administrative body of the Kingdom of Noidum. Robin took the doughnuts, her eyes widening as she scanned them. The 6 ministries? Riha, who was also present at the meeting, received a copy of the proposal. He studied it carefully, then scratched his head. Your Majesty, I've never heard of such a system." The old retainers of Noidum, except for the young and capable Riha, were too old and frail. Noir had been working himself ragged these past few days. To ensure the kingdom's smooth operation, he needed more skilled people. Lucci, who had been silently reading the dough, summarized, a Ministry of Personnel to manage officials, a Ministry of Revenue for finances, a Ministry of Rights for diplomacy and protocol, a Ministry of War for military affairs, a Ministry of Justice for law enforcement, and a Ministry of Works for construction and infrastructure. Is that correct? Noir's lips twitched. That's a bit too concise, isn't it? Explaining these concepts to people from another world was a hassle. Noir picked up the dough and said, "That's a very basic understanding. There are more details in the dough. And we'll refine the system as we go along." Isho, comfortably sipping his tea, remarked, "I'm impressed, Captain. You have a mind for administration as well." Noir accepted the compliment without a hint of embarrassment. He then turned to Riha, his tone serious. "Riha, I appoint you as Minister of War, the head of one of the 6 ministries. For now, you will be responsible for establishing these departments." Riha was stunned. He leapt from his seat and knelt on one knee, his voice filled with determination. "I will not fail, Your Majesty." Noir patted Riha's shoulder, smiling. "Don't be nervous. I'll be assisting you." Riha, somewhat relieved, bowed his head. "Yes, Your Majesty." Having been unexpectedly burdened with such a heavy responsibility during a meal, the usually stoic Riha excused himself, saying he needed to study the doughnuts on the 6 ministries in detail. Noir, pleased with Riha's diligence, readily granted his request. After Riha left, Wiper finally voiced his concern. "Captain, is it wise to entrust such an important position to Riha? The Ministry of War, no less?" It wasn't that Wiper doubted Riha's loyalty or ability, nor did he question Noir's judgment. But Isho was clearly more powerful. Wiper himself had experience leading troops, and Lucci was an exceptional strategist. Riha seemed less qualified. Noir shook his head, smiling. "You all have your roles within the underworld pirates. I have other plans for you." As for Riha, it's a gut feeling. He witnessed the fall of his kingdom firsthand. After that experience, I believe he'll manage a department of Noidum with the utmost care. Robin, ever supportive of Noir's decisions, smiled. "A bit idealistic, perhaps, but I like it." Noir laughed. "What's the point of careful planning when you're building a kingdom run by a bunch of wild pirates?" They finished their meal in a cheerful atmosphere. Just as they were about to disperse, a knock sounded on the large oak doors. "Enter." A guard entered and knelt before Noir. "Your Majesty, a letter has arrived. From the Kingdom of Westwind." Noir was surprised. Another familiar name. The Westwind Kingdom, a small nation Noir remembered visiting during the Heavenly Tribute incident. Though seemingly ordinary, the Westwind Kingdom was, in fact, a major base of operations for the Revolutionary Army. It was there that he had met Dragon, Sabo, and several other high-ranking revolutionaries. Since the Westwind Kingdom served as one of the Revolutionary Army's bases, this communication was likely initiated by them. Noir waved his hand. "Where's the letter?" The guard produced the letter, and Khalifa quickly retrieved it. Noir unfolded the letter and began to read. His brow furrowed. The heavenly tribute heist has been traced back to the Westwind Kingdom. Enel looked up, puzzled. "But I thought the plan was foolproof?" Lucci lowered his head and thought. For us and Ace, it was. The only loose end was Cretan's undisguised identity. It was inevitable that the Westwind Kingdom would be exposed. At the mention of her name, Enel seemed to shrink, a shadow of fear passing over his face. He mumbled, "That woman, was she really that careless?" Noir smirked. She probably didn't plan on returning to the kingdom after that job. After all, she had the Revolutionary Army's backing. Robin, curious, asked, "So, what does the letter say?" Noir waved the letter in the air, then placed it on the table. "Nothing much. It describes their country's situation and proposes a formal alliance between our kingdoms, but..." Brr brr brr. Before he could finish, a faint ringing sound came from Khalifa's pocket. Ignoring Noir's slightly embarrassed look, Khalifa calmly retrieved a small den mushi from her dimensional storage. Noir cleared his throat and took the specialized anti-eavesdropping den mushi. "Hey, Sabo." Sabo's cheerful voice came through. "Yo, Noir, long time no talk." Noir scratched his head. "Cut the small talk. What's going on with the Westwind Kingdom?" Sabo's voice lowered. "Miss Cretan and Momomi have been discovered. The Westwind Kingdom is now under heavy suspicion of harboring criminals." Noir chuckled. "Judging by your tone, they're safe?" The den mushi's face, mimicking Sabo's, smiled. "The Revolutionary Army has taken care of it. At worst, the Westwind Kingdom will be under martial law. Most importantly, Cretan's identity in the Westwind Kingdom was always a fabrication. Even if she stood before the world government right now, they wouldn't be able to do anything." Noir was puzzled. "Then why send me this peculiar letter? What do you, or rather, the Revolutionary Army, want?" Sabo's expression turned serious. "We do want to establish an alliance with Noidum under the guise of the Westwind Kingdom." Noir scoffed. "Spit it out. What's your real goal?" Sabo smiled. "We hope the Kingdom of Noidum can provide certain conveniences for the Revolutionary Army." Noir rejected the offer outright. No, the Revolutionary Army was an underground organization that had openly declared war on the world government. If the government discovered his kingdom was harboring revolutionaries, even his warlord status wouldn't protect him. Most importantly, why should he help the Revolutionary Army for free? He wasn't a charity, nor did he owe them anything. Sabo sighed. "I knew you'd say no. Actually, Cretan wants to join your kingdom, to become the captain of your Night Order. Of course, that's her personal wish." Noir was confused. "What do you mean, isn't she one of yours?" Sabo shook his head, a hint of exasperation in his voice. "We may be revolutionaries, but we all fight for our own ideals." Noir thought about Cretan. Besides being beautiful and powerful, she was also quite headstrong. She had abandoned her royal status to become a knight, and then joined the Revolutionary Army to fight for her beliefs. Such a determined and proactive young woman was a true example of a modern woman. Sabo continued, sounding slightly pained. "Also, Cretan and Momomi have already entered Noidum, without authorization." Noir was stunned. "Is this some kind of Revolutionary Army scheme?" Sabo chuckled. "If you were willing to cooperate with the Revolutionary Army, their actions wouldn't be an issue. But since you're not, I was worried you might kill them for trespassing, so I wanted to give you a heads up." Noir waved his hand dismissively. "I understand. I'll try to capture them and send them back." Sabo nodded. "Thanks." After hanging up, Noir remained deep in thought. Robin smiled wryly. "Miss Cretan really is devoted to the idea of a knightly order." Noir nodded. "We've met Cretan. Given her personality, this isn't surprising. We need to find them first, before they uncover any more secrets about Noidum." Robin looked at him, puzzled. "Why are you so opposed to the Revolutionary Army? Cooperating with them might not be a bad idea."
How many kingdoms in the world had secret dealings with the Revolutionary Army?
Even in the ancient desert kingdom of Alabasta, there were bound to be revolutionary informants. The Revolutionary Army's infiltration capabilities were feared by the world government itself. Would Noir's resistance even be effective? Noir stretched lazily. "There's no choice. The Heavenly Tribute incident hasn't completely blown over yet. We can't afford to get involved with the Revolutionary Army right now. Otherwise, the world government would have another excuse to target him." Fortunately, they probably hadn't discovered that he'd tampered with the shadows of the Celestial Dragon hostages. When the time came to finally break ties, he would make sure those arrogant fools paid the ultimate price. With the Revolutionary Army's interruption, the meeting came to an end. In the following days, Rehad diligently established the Ministry of War while also overseeing the selection of personnel for the other 5 ministries. He He was constantly busy, working tirelessly. Noir, having delegated much of the work, found himself with more free time. The various affairs of the kingdom of Noitum were proceeding smoothly. With the kingdom gradually operating on its own, Noir's adventurous spirit, dormant for a short while, began to stir once more. Crocodile had put a hit on him in the underworld. It was time to settle that score. It was time for a return trip to deal with Crocodile once and for all.